A wall of heat pressed down over the makeshift military outpost somewhere in the Middle East, the midday sun glaring off sheets of twisted metal and fragmented concrete. Sergeant Galen Murdoch squinted behind his dusty goggles, gripping the edge of the Humvee's open door. The air was thick with tension and the bitter tang of smoke. Beyond a row of half-demolished buildings, a U.S. Army helicopter circled overhead, its blades whipping the scorched sky into an ominous thunder. Galen's patrol convoy consisted of 3 armored Humvees rumbling along a dirt road, eyes peeled for roadside bombs. His team had spent weeks sweeping Eid Laden routes, trying to make safe passage for local civilians and Allied forces. He never expected this final run to become so personal. Suddenly, a deafening blast erupted ahead. The lead vehicle vanished in a burst of flames, the shockwave slamming Galen's Humvee and causing it to fishtail. Sand and debris pelted the windshield. The driver wrestled the steering wheel, narrowly keeping them upright. Galen's heart hammered. He could see black smoke mushrooming from the twisted wreck of their lead Humvee. "IED!" he roared into the radio. "Clear the kill zone now!" As they skidded to a stop, Galen threw the door open and lunged out onto the dusty road. The second Humvee behind him attempted to provide cover, while the burning wreck in front spewed acrid smoke. Through the flames, he glimpsed a soldier, Private Simon Wilcox, alive but pinned, desperately reaching upward. Galen sprinted across the scorching ground. Hot wind tore at his face, the stench of burning fuel and charred metal swirling around him. Bullets cracked from an unseen sniper in a ruined building nearby. He ducked instinctively, adrenaline spiking. The helicopter overhead responded with quick bursts from its cannon, trying to suppress the threat. He dropped beside Simon, hooking both arms under the younger soldier's shoulders. "Hang on!" Galen gasped. The private moaned in agony, his left leg twisted and blood-soaked. Inch by inch, Galen dragged him away from the licking flames. The roar of the inferno and the shrieks of ammunition cooking off inside the wreckage pounded Galen's ears. They collapsed behind the partial cover of a toppled cement barrier. Dust billowed around them. Galen hunched over Simon, rummaging for a field tourniquet. Yet even as he cinched the strap around Simon's thigh, the private's eyes glazed with shock. "We're almost home," Galen murmured, voice rough. "Stay with me." But Simon's head lolled back, his eyes fixed on the sky, breath hitching once before going still. Galen froze, arms trembling around the lifeless body. A strangled growl built in his throat. So much sacrifice, so many men left to bleed in the dust of a foreign land. A new thunder broke overhead as a second chopper unleashed a missile into the sniper's hideout. The resulting fireball lit up the midday gloom. For Galen, it barely registered. All he saw was Simon's vacant stare. 2 hours later, the battered survivors were back at the forward operating base. The commanding officer grimly handed Galen his orders. The Rangers had sustained too many casualties. They were rotating stateside a month early. Galen couldn't even muster relief. He simply nodded and boarded the cargo plane bound for home with Simon's dog tags clenched in his fist. Roughly 2 weeks later, Galen arrived at a sprawling U.S. military base stateside, stepping off a transport flight at some unholy hour of the morning. His mind still felt stuck in the swirling dust of the desert, haunted by the sight of dying friends and charred vehicles. He scarcely noticed the salutes from weary night shift personnel as he crossed the tarmac. By the time he reached the married housing complex, the sky was turning the color of ash. The lights in the building's corridor flickered with cheap fluorescence. Galen carried his duffel bag quietly upstairs, every muscle in his body sore from tension. He was grateful to be back, grateful for a hot shower, a real bed, and especially for his wife, Selena Murdoch. At least that's what he told himself, forcing away the cynicism creeping through his exhausted brain. He hadn't warned Selena he would return tonight. He wanted it to be a surprise. Maybe he'd show up, drop his bag, and she'd rush into his arms. They'd weep together over how close death had come to him. They'd remember what truly mattered in life. That hope guided him through the final corridor. He slipped his key into the front lock and pushed the door open. The place was dim, just a faint glow from the bedroom at the end of the short hallway. His footsteps were soundless on the carpet. Approaching the half-closed door, he spotted a pair of men's boots on the welcome mat. Not his. Something twisted in his gut. Carefully, he eased the door open and saw Selina sprawled in bed, naked, half covered by the sheets. And next to her lay Royce Host, a fellow officer. Galen recognized that face from official briefings. The man was equally undressed, one arm draped over Selina's waist. Galen's breath turned to ice. His mind reeled. Simon's bloody face flashed in his memory, his final strangled breath. All that sacrifice, and this was what greeted Galen at home. His pulse thundered with a fury that dwarfed anything he'd felt in combat. He slowly let go of his duffel bag, letting it thud against the floor. The sound stirred Selina. She blinked awake, confusion turning to alarm. Royce jolted upright, eyes wide with terror. Galen tightened his grip on the sidearm holstered at his hip. A single thought raged through him. They were having their fun while I risked my life. Darkness, deeper and more menacing than any desert night, flared behind Galen's eyes. He stared at the lovers as though they were targets in his rifle sight. Selina opened her mouth, about to speak, but Galen's gaze hardened. His right hand fell to his sidearm, tension humming through every muscle. In the stillness, he heard only his own heartbeat. All the anger, betrayal, and grief boiled over. His voice was just a low growl. "You betrayed me." And with that, Chapter 1 ends on the brink of a storm as fierce as the war Galen left behind. Early morning light filtered through the blinds, revealing the cramped, standard-issue bedroom in sharper detail. Selina yanked the sheets over herself. Royce scrambled to the far side of the bed, hands shaking. But there was no real place to hide from Galen Murdoch's fury. "Galen!" Selina began, voice trembling. "What are you doing home? You weren't—" He flicked on the overhead lamp, bathing the room in harsh white light. "Answer me!" he snarled. "How long have you been crawling around behind my back?" His eyes flicked to Royce. "And you, Captain Host, did you think I wouldn't find out?" Royce held his palms up. "Sergeant, calm down. We can explain. This isn't what it looks like. Isn't it?" Galen's tone dripped with icy contempt. "My buddy died in my arms overseas. I came home with his blood on my clothes, and you—" He pointed the muzzle of his sidearm at Royce. "You're sneaking into my bed with my wife?" Selina, wrapped in the bed cover, tried to muster defiance. "You left me alone for months. I needed someone. You disappeared into that war, Galen, and you never—" "Shut up!" His words cut like a blade. He advanced, pressing the barrel under Royce's chin. The man's eyes bulged in panic. "Sergeant, please," Royce squeaked. "I never meant—" Galen seized Royce by the throat in a sudden movement. In the space of one breath, he twisted. A sickening crack echoed off the walls. Royce went limp, eyes rolling back. Galen let him drop to the floor with a dull thud. Selina gasped, her scream breaking on her lips. She tried to back away, but Galen's rage was unstoppable. He grabbed her wrist, yanking her closer. She fought, nails raking his forearm, but she stood no chance against the soldier's brute strength fueled by betrayal and heartbreak. "Galen, stop!" she sobbed. "Let me go, I'll—" He clamped a hand over her mouth, his breathing ragged. Reality blurred in his mind, flickering between the horrors of war and the raw pain of this moment. He recalled Simon's final stare, reminding him how loyalty could be shattered in an instant. He whispered in her ear, voice eerily calm. "You were supposed to be my safe place, but you'd rather be with another man. You spat on everything I fought for." Her wide eyes pleaded, but Galen's expression never softened. His grip tightened around her neck. She struggled, chest heaving. After a few seconds of choking, she jerked once, and went still. Silence. Only Galen's ragged breathing filled the room. He stared down at Selina's lifeless form. The ring on her finger seemed to mock him, glinting in the lamp's glare. He felt strangely hollow, no relief, no regret, just a yawning emptiness. A few minutes later, he snapped out of his daze. With measured composure, he grabbed towels to wipe his hands. He stripped off his sweat-soaked uniform shirt and stepped into the shower. Hot water scalded his skin, but it did nothing to wash away the darkness clouding his mind. By the time he emerged, the sun was brighter through the window. He put on fresh fatigues, his old ranger uniform. The mirror reflected a man changed, the faint scar near his left temple twitching whenever he frowned. He knew the base would discover the bodies soon. He didn't care. Let them brand him a monster. The war had already made him one. Collecting his personal handgun, spare ammunition, and a few supplies, he pulled on a jacket. Finally, he turned to look at the bed, where Selena and Royce lay in a grim tableau. He exhaled softly, feeling the last vestiges of pity dissolve in the pit of his stomach. Then he stepped out into the hallway, leaving the door ajar. Downstairs, no one stirred. Security at the gates would be lax at this hour. He'd vanish before sunrise. Pulling a baseball cap low over his eyes, he headed toward his pickup. As he climbed in and started the engine, a numb voice in his head murmured, "They deserved it." And so, just hours after returning from a war zone, Galen Murdoch abandoned the one place he'd once called home, driven by betrayal, heartbreak, and a growing conviction that anyone who broke vows deserved punishment. First light painted the horizon in pale streaks of pink and gold as Galen Murdoch steered his pickup off the military base. Nobody questioned him at the gate. Some bleary-eyed guard merely glanced at the ID and waved him through. It was shockingly easy to leave the scene of the crime behind. His mind churned in a haze of fury and disillusionment. The rhythmic hum of the engine provided a grim counterpoint to his thoughts. He kept replaying the final moments in that bedroom. Selena's betrayal, Royce's pleading eyes, and the choking rage he felt when he realized how naive he'd been. At a half-deserted rest stop miles away, Galen pulled in and parked behind a long-haul truck. An older man in a flannel shirt stood by the vending machines. Galen made brief, impassive eye contact, then turned to pop open the pickup's tailgate. He rummaged through his duffel, pulling out civilian clothes. With practiced efficiency, he changed on the spot, trading his fatigues for worn jeans and a dark sweatshirt. The uniform that once defined him lay discarded in the truck bed. He approached the trucker casually. "Morning," he said. "Know where I can find a used car dealer around here?" The man sniffed, scratching his stubbly chin. "Couple miles up the highway, exit 22, Paul's Used Auto. He'll take just about anything if you haggle right." Galen thanked him and headed back to the driver's seat. He stared at his reflection in the side mirror. Short-cropped hair, faint lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes, and behind them, a storm he couldn't quite contain. "Just about anything," he muttered, echoing the trucker's words. It took less than an hour to reach Paul's Used Auto, a run-down lot ringed with chain-link fencing. The place reeked of engine grease and desperation. Paul, an unshaven man in a grease-stained baseball cap, eyed Galen's truck with a mixture of distrust and greed. "You looking to trade?" Paul asked. "Yeah," Galen replied tersely. "No questions about the registration, right? Long as you have the title in hand, I'm not your priest. Won't ask for confessions." They haggled briefly. Galen surrendered the truck's keys and some cash, driving away half an hour later in a nondescript sedan. Its license plate was nearly illegible with grime, perfect for slipping under the radar. He had just enough funds left to fuel up and buy supplies before vanishing into the backwoods. By mid-afternoon, he'd navigated winding roads deep into a national forest, well off the main highways. Towering pines lined the gravel path, blotting out the sun. At a narrow clearing, Galen parked. With the methodical precision of a man on a mission, he concealed the sedan beneath branches and leaves, ensuring it wouldn't be easily spotted from above. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. There, among the quiet hush of the forest, Galen finally allowed himself a moment to breathe. He crouched by a small stream, splashing cold water on his face. Images of Selena's final look kept flashing through his mind. If he dwelled on it too long, he might cave beneath the guilt. But every time remorse crept in, he pictured the heartbreak of losing Simon overseas and how Selena was entertaining Royce while he risked his life. He scowled, letting the anger fester again. Galen spent the next hours setting up a primitive camp. A small tarp overhead, a sleeping bag, and a few rations. His ex-ranger instincts kicked in, planning for minimal smoke, minimal sound. If the authorities combed the wilderness, he intended to remain invisible. By nightfall, the forest was pitch black, save for a sliver of moon above. Galen stared into the darkness and mulled over his new reality. Betrayal was everywhere, some disguised as wives at home. others disguised as so-called allies in war zones. Maybe Selina's treachery was just the tip of the iceberg. A kernel of an idea took root in his exhausted mind. He'd dedicated his life to protecting the innocent. Now, he'd hunt down those who betrayed their vows like Selina had. A twisted sense of righteousness glimmered amid his anger. He clenched his jaw. "Let them call me a criminal," he murmured. "I'll show them what real betrayal costs." A week slipped by in relative isolation. Galen moved from campsite to campsite, never staying put for more than a night or two. Each morning he'd wake early, dismantle his tarp, and bury any traces of a campfire. By day he scouted the dirt roads and smaller towns along the forest edges. By night he planned, driven by memories that wouldn't let him rest. Late one evening he ventured into a small rural town. A single neon sign blinked above a rundown bar called Moonlight Alley. The parking lot was cracked asphalt, riddled with weeds sprouting under the glow of a flickering street lamp. Galen parked his sedan in a shadowy corner, ensuring no one could read his plate. Inside, the bar smelled of stale beer and cheap perfume. Red vinyl stools lined the counter, where a lone bartender polished glasses with a stained rag. A jukebox in the corner played some old country tune about heartbreak and living hard. Galen scanned the patrons. Some were locals in dusty jeans, a few off-duty truckers, and then he noticed a slim woman with carefully styled hair and a wedding ring glinting under the bar lights. She giggled as two men tried to flirt. She didn't push them away. Galen sat a few seats down, ordering a soda to keep his mind sharp. He observed her from the corner of his eye, the ring on her finger, and the way her hand lingered on one man's shoulder. The man whispered something that made her laugh, an overly familiar laugh. Galen recalled Selina's carefree grin in old photos. Anger churned in his stomach. Eventually, the woman turned and flashed Galen a coy smile. "Hey, soldier boy, you all by yourself tonight?" she teased, apparently noting his tense posture and the faint outline of dog tags under his hoodie. He shrugged. "You could say that." She slid off her stool and sauntered over, the men she'd been entertaining glowering in annoyance. "I'm Naomi," she cooed. "What's your name? Does it matter?" She tilted her head, a playful smirk. "Mystery man, huh? Well, maybe I like a little mystery." Her ring, that gleaming band, taunted him. She was so open about making a connection with someone who wasn't her husband. He felt the blood pounding behind his eyes. After a few minutes of shallow chatter, she suggested stepping outside. "It's loud in here," she said, though the bar was anything but loud. Her gaze was hungry, seeking excitement. Galen recognized that look. He'd seen it in Selina's eyes when she was bored with their marriage but never told him outright. "Sure," he muttered. "Let's go." They slipped out the side entrance. The parking lot was virtually empty except for a row of battered cars beneath dull lights. Naomi looped her arm through Galen's. "Got a place we can talk?" He guided her behind a decrepit delivery van. The moon lay half-hidden behind clouds, casting everything in ghostly gray. She pressed close, her perfume cloying in his nostrils. A sly grin curved her lips. He spotted the faint indent on her left ring finger, a man's name probably engraved inside that ring, he thought bitterly. "Tell me something," he said quietly. "Your husband. Does he know you're here?" Naomi's grin faltered. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Galen replied, his voice dropping. "I hate liars." She gave a small laugh, though her eyes flickered with unease. "I'm not a liar, I just—" In a flash, Galen's hand snapped up, gripping her shoulders. He leaned in as though about to kiss her, then locked his forearm around her neck. Her eyes went wide. She tried to scream, but it came out a muffled gasp. "Shh," he hissed, forcing her back against the van. Her breath hitched in panic. He stared at her ring, an icy wave of hatred surging in his chest. Then, with ruthless precision, he crushed the air from her throat. She struggled, nails clawing his arms, feet flailing, but his hold was iron. Only a few seconds later, her body slackened. Galen let her sag to the pavement. He stepped back, breathing hard. The adrenaline left him slightly dizzy, yet beneath the swirl of shock, a grim conviction solidified in his mind. He'd spared some other husband the pain he'd endured. At least, that's how he rationalized it. The distant whine of sirens snapped him to attention. No time to linger. He dragged her body behind the van's open cargo doors, half-covered it with a discarded tarp. Then he slipped into the shadows, heading for his sedan. Another life snuffed out, another vow-breaker punished. A few minutes later, he was on the highway again, the bar's neon sign fading in the rearview mirror. Unbeknownst to him, local authorities would soon discover the grim scene and connect the dots to the still-warm cases of Selena Murdoch and Royce Host. A damp chill clung to the forest air. Galen Murdoch crouched beneath a cluster of pines, hidden by branches heavy with dew. His makeshift camp was virtually invisible. Any outsider would have walked past without so much as a second glance. He'd learned these techniques back in ranger school: camouflage, low-noise movement, concealment. It was still early gray light filtering through the canopy. Galen brushed a few leaves aside, revealing the dark sedan he'd driven into the woods. Mud coated the wheels, and pine needles blanketed the windshield. He'd chosen this spot carefully, a narrow logging trail far off the main roads, impossible to spot from helicopters or passing rangers. His mind drifted through half-remembered scenes from war zones, the tension, the rush of a well-planned ambush, how he'd concealed IED detection gear, orchestrated nighttime stakeouts. Now, ironically, he used the same skills for a far darker purpose, stalking women he considered traitors. The memory of Selena's final, terrified gasp fueled his anger. When he closed his eyes, he could almost feel her wrist under his palm. A snapping twig broke his reverie. He rolled into a prone position, heart thumping. But it was only a small deer nibbling at damp ferns. Still, his nerves stayed razor-sharp. He checked the time on a battered digital watch, nearly 6 in the morning. "Time to move," he muttered. He'd heard on a portable radio about a statewide manhunt. Authorities had discovered the murdered woman by the bar Naomi, along with evidence linking her death to the same perpetrator as the double homicide on base. While they hadn't yet publicly named him, Galen guessed it wouldn't be long before his name, Galen Murdoch, was blasted on every news channel. Gathering his small supply of rations, he carefully removed a net of branches from the sedan's hood. Within minutes, he was navigating a narrow forest track, branches scraping the sides. If the cops were getting close, he'd find a new hideaway. No one would catch him off guard. Meanwhile, less than 30 miles away, a group of uniformed officers and 2 plainclothes detectives combed through the edge of the forest. They'd set up a temporary command post near an abandoned shack. Among them was Detective Monica Reyes, a recent transfer from out of state, known for her meticulous approach. She knelt by a cluster of footprints in the muddy ground. "Look at these boot impressions," she said, using a small brush to clear debris. "Standard-issue military style, the same pattern we found near the bar's parking lot." A local deputy, Officer Gaines, rubbed the back of his neck. "You think this is our guy? The ex-ranger the feds mentioned?" She exhaled, nodding. "Likely. If Murdoch's in these woods, he's got the advantage. He knows how to hide." Behind them, an FBI agent named Joseph Tanner approached with a radio in hand. "Reyes, we just got forensics back from the crime scenes," he announced. "Same type of neck trauma on each victim, fractured vertebrae from a forceful break. That's not random, it's methodical. Points to highly trained, possibly special ops." Reyes tossed her brush aside, eyes somber. "All right, we'll expand the search radius. But let's be realistic. If he's as skilled as they say, he'll see us coming before we get anywhere near him." Tanner nodded gravely. "We'll keep searching. Meanwhile, HQ wants us to double-check any roads leading out. This man's wanted on multiple homicide charges now." They parted ways, determined to set up a perimeter. None of them knew that Galen was already far beyond their reach, slipping onto a back road heading deeper into nowhere. That afternoon, Galen pulled into a nondescript rural town. A battered convenience store sign read Rodwell Groceries, though half the letters were burned out. He parked behind the store, scanning the area. A middle-aged woman in a patterned blouse was loading groceries into her trunk, chatting on her phone, wedding ring glittering. Galen felt that familiar anger stirring, but he forced it down. He had no intention of striking in broad daylight. Still, a part of him craved the rush, the sick sense of power he got from deciding whether someone lived or died, justifying it by labeling them unfaithful. A flash of Selena's lifeless eyes jolted him. He drew in a breath, recentering. One reckless move in daylight could blow his cover. He slipped inside the store for supplies, canned goods, bottled water, a fresh hoodie. The bored cashier barely looked up. He paid in cash and left quietly. Outside, thick clouds rolled overhead, threatening rain. Perfect. The gloom would mask him, hamper any police aerial search. As he drove away, his mind flicked to old battlefield successes, the times he'd laid traps for insurgents. If the cops were closing in, maybe he could turn the tables. This mental shift was new, a sign of how deep he'd sunk. He wasn't just evading authorities, he was planning a possible confrontation. Galen's conviction grew more twisted by the hour. "I'm cleaning up a broken system," he told himself, knuckles white on the steering wheel. "They'll never understand. They'll only try to stop me." A cold rain began to spatter the windshield. With mechanical determination, he flicked on the wipers and pressed the gas, vanishing into the wet haze like a ghost from a war no one else remembered. A steady drizzle streaked the windows of a cramped FBI conference room, fluorescent lights overhead buzzing. Agents and local law enforcement huddled around a long table scattered with photographs, crime scene shots from the bar parking lot, and the base housing complex. At the head sat Agent Joseph Tanner, who had come down from the regional office to coordinate the hunt for Galen Murdoch. Detective Monica Reyes stepped forward, tapping on the largest image pinned to a whiteboard. It showed a lifeless woman's body, neck at an unnatural angle. "We have 3 confirmed homicides with the same M.O., she said. "Military precision, minimal evidence left behind. We suspect he's operating alone." Tanner cleared his throat. "Ballistics from the base show that Murdoch was an exceptional marksman, but these murders mostly involve manual force. So this is personal for him. He's not just trying to kill quietly. He wants to impose a certain method." An older agent, Foster, folded his arms. "Any theories on motive beyond the betrayal angle?" Reyes exchanged a look with Tanner. "We found a note at the last scene." She fished a plastic evidence bag from the table. Inside was a small scrap of paper with scrawled writing that read, "They betray their vows. They pay the price." She inhaled. It's almost vigilante logic, someone who believes he's punishing unfaithful women. A hush fell over the room as everyone processed the message. Finally, a local sheriff, Hughes, piped up. "This man's extremely dangerous and presumably well-trained. We can't rely on standard patrol. We need a specialized task force." Tanner nodded. "Agreed. We're implementing a new approach. That's where Officer Julie Ricks comes in." He motioned to a young woman with sharp eyes standing near the doorway. She gave a small nod to the group. "Ricks has gone undercover before," Tanner continued. "If our intel is correct, Murdoch's approach is to find a woman who appears to be cheating or open to it, someone wearing a wedding ring, flirting alone at bars. We'll set a trap with Ricks as bait." Murmurs circulated, some concerned, others intrigued. Ricks stepped forward. "I'll be wired, and we'll have backup units posted outside. With luck, he'll target me, and we can move in before anyone else gets hurt." Reyes looked at Ricks with measured respect. "He's lethal up close. If you feel threatened, we pull you out. We can't risk—" "I know the risks," Ricks cut her off gently. "But we're running out of time. Every day he's out there, some unsuspecting woman is at risk." Tanner set down a stack of files. "We've identified a bar on the outskirts of this region. It's known for late-night crowds, some shady activity. Perfect environment for him to strike again. We'll coordinate a sting operation tomorrow night." The plan was made. They'd position plainclothes officers inside and around the bar. Ricks would pose as a bored, ring-wearing wife looking for attention. If Murdoch showed, they'd catch him red-handed. That same evening, Galen dozed inside his sedan, parked in a deserted clearing off a back road. The rain had finally stopped. A half-moon lit the sky. He had a small battery-powered radio on the passenger seat, scanning for local news. Static, then a burst of a local anchor's voice. "Still at large, the suspect is considered armed and dangerous. Authorities advise citizens to avoid traveling alone at night." He shut it off. They were closing in, but he felt no panic, only a cold thrill. "They can search all they want," he murmured. "They won't find me unless I let them." Despite his bravado, something gnawed at him. He needed to keep taking caution. The last kill had left a partial footprint at the scene, and the press had singled out an ex-military suspect. Sooner or later, someone might recognize him. But the compulsion to strike again kept building, a craving he couldn't fully control. He rifled through a tattered notebook in which he'd scribbled certain details: bars, small roadside motels, rest stops. He'd watch for a wedding ring, watch for that blatant disregard for fidelity. Then punishment. Yet, a nagging voice reminded him, they're setting traps too. Should he lay low? He stared at the notebook, flipping pages. One last time, he whispered, as though bargaining with himself. I'll show them no one breaks a vow without consequence. Outside, an owl hooted in the distance, a low, haunting sound. Galen slid deeper into his seat, mind churning with strategies. He pictured a black and white memory from his deployment the moment he'd ambushed an insurgent cell under the cover of darkness. Their shock mirrored the fear he now saw in the eyes of his victims. Strange how war had bled into his personal crusade. Eventually, weariness crept over him, and he dozed off with the notebook open on his lap. Overhead, the moon slipped behind clouds, plunging the forest into deeper shadow. In less than 24 hours, that shadow would envelop an unsuspecting bar, where law enforcement lay in wait. Galen Murdoch would soon face a final confrontation with the life he left behind, and the law determined to stop him. Nightfall draped the outskirts of a town named Ridgeview, a scatter of neon signs against the black sky. The target location was a seedy bar called Harley's Haven. A single flickering streetlight buzzed overhead, reflecting off puddles in the cracked parking lot. A battered motorcycle stood out front, along with a handful of cars. Perfect territory for the sting operation. Inside, stifling cigarette smoke clung to sticky tables. Over loudspeakers, a worn jukebox cycled through country rock tunes. This was a place where secrets thrived, and if the FBI's instincts were correct, Galen Murdoch might slip inside hoping to find his next victim. At the far end of the bar, Officer Julie Ricks sat alone, swirling a cheap cocktail. She wore a simple gold band on her left hand and a leather jacket that gave her a slightly edgy look. Her expression was carefully arranged to seem both bored and curious. A married woman looking for excitement. A hidden microphone nestled in the lapel of her jacket, transmitting everything to a covert listening van parked 2 blocks away. 2 seats down from her, a burly man in a baseball cap nursed a beer. 1 table over, 3 off-duty truckers played cards. And in a corner booth, a couple softly argued over an empty basket of fries. Ricks scanned the entrance, heart thrumming. She kept her posture relaxed, but adrenaline sharpened her senses. Any minute, their target could walk in. Outside, in an unmarked SUV, Detective Monica Reyes watched the bar's front door through binoculars. Next to her, Agent Joseph Tanner listened to the quiet hiss of Ricks's feed. She's calm, Tanner muttered, noting the steadiness of Ricks's breathing. We might be here all night. Reyes kept her gaze steady. He'll come. Our intel puts him somewhere in a 50-mile radius, and if he's as obsessive as we suspect, he won't be able to resist. They'd stationed additional officers around the building and in the parking lot. Everyone was on edge, weapons ready. The only unknown, how violently Galen might react if cornered. An hour later, the door opened with a squeak. A man walked in wearing a gray hoodie pulled up around his face, a baseball cap shadowing his features. He paused, scanning the room. Ricks sipped her drink, pretending not to notice, yet her pulse kicked higher. There was something about the man's stance, cautious, deliberate. Military, maybe. He took a seat a couple stools from her, gave a curt nod to the bartender, and ordered a whiskey. For several minutes, he didn't engage with anyone, just kept surreptitiously surveying the bar. Finally, his gaze flicked to Ricks's left hand, where the ring gleamed faintly in the overhead light. She felt his stare like static electricity. Her stomach tightened, but she forced a small, speculative smile. He moved 1 stool closer. Slow night, huh? Ricks shrugged. Guess so. Not a lot of places to go around here, I hear. He gave a quiet snort. Yeah, well, must be tough out alone like that. His gaze lingered pointedly on her ring. Your husband mind? Her heart thumped. That direct question was what they'd prepped for. He's out of town. she replied, injecting a note of boredom. Gone so often I barely remember we're married. He grunted, swirling his drink. Sometimes people cheat, you know. Not everyone's loyal. She caught his eyes. Yes, there was a glint of something dangerous there. A fleeting image of Selena's murder flashed across her mind, the crime scene photos. She steadied her nerves. Yeah, she said softly. Some folks do more than just cheat, if you catch my drift. He studied her for a beat. What about you? You looking for trouble tonight? His tone was low, edged with tension. Rix's breath fluttered, but she kept her act. Maybe, she said, giving a casual shrug. I don't see why not. He nodded. Let's step outside. Place is getting loud. Bingo. Rix recognized the pattern from the earlier murders. The suspect would entice the woman outside, to a darker spot, his territory. Her hidden mic picked up everything. She resisted glancing toward the exit, not wanting to tip him off. All right, she replied. Lead the way. Behind the bar, the parking lot lay in shadows, only a single flickering lamp near the far corner. Wind rustled through an old chain-link fence. The man Galen gestured for her to follow around the side of the building, toward an alley littered with broken crates and trash bags. Rix's heart pounded. This was the high-risk zone. She heard Reyes's voice crackle faintly in her earpiece. Stand by. We're moving in. But apparently Galen sensed something. He paused, scanning the empty corner. You sure you're alone? He murmured, a note of suspicion creeping in. Rix feigned ignorance. Yeah, why? His expression hardened. Thought I heard something. At that moment, an officer stationed behind a dumpster shifted his stance, causing a soft scrape. Galen's eyes narrowed. In an instant, he lunged, grabbing Rix by the arm. You lied. She tried to pull free, but his grip was iron. Her instincts flared. She reached for the hidden pistol at her waist. His other hand lashed out, knocking the gun from her grasp. It skittered across the asphalt. Get your hands off me! She shouted, twisting. But he'd already pinned her against the wall. A savage glint filled his gaze. This was the same lethal glare from every kill. Rix forced herself not to panic, trusting the backup to intervene within seconds. A flash of movement at the alley entrance. Detective Reyes and Agent Tanner rushed in, guns drawn. Freeze! Reyes shouted. Police! Galen snarled, yanked Rix to shield himself. The alley exploded into chaos. Two more plainclothes officers sprinted up from behind, shouting, Drop the woman! Hands in the air! In a blurred heartbeat, Galen pivoted. His forearm clamped Rix's neck. With his free hand, he snatched her sidearm from the ground. A precarious standoff. Back off or she dies, he snarled. Rix gasped for air, eyes wide. She could feel the cold muzzle grazing her temple. Tanner steadied his weapon. Easy, Murdoch. You're surrounded. No need for more bloodshed. For a moment, it seemed Galen might surrender. Then he spotted an opening one officer was slightly out of position, leaving a gap near the alley exit. He shoved Rix aside and darted toward the gap, firing a shot that forced an officer to dive behind a trash bin. Bullets cracked off the brick walls. Galen sprinted toward the parking lot, arms pumping. Rix staggered to her feet, choking in a breath. Reyes and Tanner dashed after him. Two more agents rushed from behind the bar, guns raised. In a matter of seconds, they converged on him near a battered sedan. Galen spun, flinging himself to the ground behind the car's hood. Gunfire rattled the night. He fired wildly, the muzzle flash illuminating his tense, sweat-streaked face. Officer Rix, regaining her bearings, approached from the rear flank. She saw a chance he was pinned, but Galen, with lightning reflexes, lunged out. He managed to grab her ankle, yanking her off balance. Before anyone could react, he wrestled a second gun from her ankle holster. Crack! A shot rang out from behind another car. An FBI agent took aim at Galen. The bullet slammed into his chest. He stumbled, almost dropping the gun. Another shot struck him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Blood sprayed across the fender. He collapsed onto the pavement, breath ragged, eyes rolling back. The final echo of gunshots faded into the hush of night. Rix rushed in, gun trained on his trembling form. Galen stared skyward, chest heaving, a crimson stain spread across his hoodie. You won't, he rasped, voice barely audible, but the rest drowned in a wet cough. Then his eyes fluttered shut. Detective Reyes hurried forward, pressing a hand to his neck, feeling for a pulse. "We need an ambulance now," she called out. But she already saw the telltale signs of shock, his breathing shallow, heartbeat fading. Agent Tanner radioed dispatch. The sirens began their eerie approach. This would be the end of Galen Murdoch's rampage. As Rick stood over him, she saw the blankness in his eyes. She couldn't help but shiver at how close she'd come to becoming his final victim. Harsh fluorescent lights glared down on the operating room floor as paramedics rushed in a bloodied, unconscious Galen Murdoch. Monitors beeped frantically. A surgeon, Dr. Patel, barked orders to the scrub nurse. "Gunshot wound to the chest and shoulder. Massive blood loss. Let's get him intubated and prep for thoracotomy," Patel commanded, snapping on surgical gloves. Outside in the corridor, Agent Joseph Tanner and Detective Monica Reyes stood anxiously. Officer Ricks was being checked for bruises in another wing, but she refused to leave until she knew the outcome. A paramedic wheeled in a second gurney with another patient, a motor vehicle accident victim. The ER was at capacity, staff sprinting about in a controlled frenzy. Tanner peered through the glass pane, watching them transfer Galen onto the operating table. "He's lost a lot of blood," he said quietly to Reyes. "Not sure he's going to make it." She nodded. "After everything he's done. Maybe this is—" She paused, unsettled. "We'll see." Inside the OR, overhead machines bleeped their urgent messages. The surgical team cut away Galen's hoodie, revealing the bullet wounds. Blood seeped onto the steel table. Dr. Patel slid a retractor in place, searching for the bullet lodged near Galen's heart. "He's crashing," a nurse called. On the monitor, Galen's heart rate plummeted, the line zigzagging dangerously. "We're losing him!" Dr. Patel grabbed the paddles for defibrillation. "Clear!" A jolt surged through Galen's body. No rhythm. The nurse called out his vitals, still no pulse. "Again!" Patel repeated. Another jolt. The heart monitor spat out flatline. For a split second, it felt like the entire room held its breath. Outside the overhead lights, a weird hush seemed to settle. Some intangible presence of fleeting darkness hovered like a shadow near the ceiling. If anyone had been watching that corner, they might have sworn they saw something swirl, intangible, yet charged with eerie significance. A surgical resident placed 2 fingers to Galen's neck. "No pulse," she murmured. "He's gone." Dr. Patel grimaced, stepping back. Time of death. He checked the clock. 11:23 p.m. At that very instant, 2 more paramedics rushed in with a critical trauma case from a head-on collision that had just arrived. The patient, Tristan Walsh, according to the ID pinned to his shredded clothing, appeared to be in dire shape. Bruising across his chest suggested internal injuries. He was unresponsive, heart rate dangerously low. A second surgeon, Dr. Randall, took over. "We have a free table? We need immediate intervention." The staff scrambled, shifting from the heartbreak of Galen's demise to saving the next life. As they wheeled Tristan in, the overhead lights flickered slightly. That swirling darkness near the ceiling quivered, almost drawn by some unseen magnetism. Then, like a gust of wind, it swept from Galen's body and drifted across the room, hovering near Tristan. Dr. Patel shook off the disquiet. He and Dr. Randall focused on stabilizing Tristan. The man's heart stuttered, monitor sounding a shrill alarm. The defibrillator was prepped once more. Outside the closed doors, Tanner and Reyes approached a nurse who stepped out, removing her mask. She looked solemn. "Your suspect. He didn't make it. I'm sorry," she said quietly. Agent Tanner exhaled, shoulders slumping. Well, it's over now." A swirl of conflicting emotions played across his face. Relief that the murders might stop, sadness at the tragic waste of life. Reyes nodded, pensive. "We'll have to file the official report. The families of those victims, maybe they'll get closure knowing he can't hurt anyone else." The nurse offered a faint nod. "We have another trauma in there. They're doing all they can for him," she added. "It's a busy night." Inside the OR, Dr. Randall barked, "Charge to 200! Clear!" The current jolted through Tristan Walsh's body, arching his back momentarily. The line on the monitor jumped, then settled into a chaotic flutter. They tried again. "Charge to 300! Clear!" In that surreal moment, the swirling darkness drifting above seemed to condense, like a shadow sliding into Tristan's motionless form. No one noticed. All eyes were on the monitors. Suddenly, the beep steadied. Tristan's heart resumed a weak but stable rhythm. A nurse gasped. "We have a pulse!" The entire team sprang into coordinated action, hooking Tristan to IV drips and oxygen, flooding him with life-saving measures. In the hall, Reyes paused, hearing a burst of excitement from behind the OR doors. She glanced at Tanner. "They must have saved the other guy," she said softly. Tanner gave a small nod. Well, good for him. They stood there, the silent knowledge that their case, the Murdoch case, had reached a grim conclusion. But neither realized the deeper implications of what had just transpired in that operating room. As far as the FBI was concerned, Galen Murdoch was officially deceased, and with him ended the string of brutal murders that plagued the region. No one saw the ephemeral flicker of darkness that vanished into Tristan's unconscious body. No one guessed that something intangible survived. All they knew, the nightmares unleashed by Galen Murdoch had been put to rest. For now. Morning sun filtered through the sleek glass windows of Johnson Engineering, illuminating rows of cubicles and neatly labeled offices. The hum of computers mixed with the low chatter of employees settling in for another workday. In a corner office with a brass plaque reading, "Tristan Walsh, Lead Engineer," Tristan himself sat hunched over a stack of technical drawings, brow furrowed. He was in his early 30s, average height, with a gentle face that often gave away his every emotion. Dressed in a plain button-down and slacks, Tristan looked like the model of an unassuming engineer, quiet, diligent, perhaps too easy to ignore. A few years back, Tristan's expertise in mechanical design earned him the lead engineer title, yet many of his peers barely respected him. Whenever an issue arose on the manufacturing floor or a client demanded modifications, Tristan struggled with direct confrontation. His subordinates would sometimes roll their eyes behind his back, calling him too soft or afraid of his own shadow. This morning, he glanced at a memo from Callum Darnell, the company's confident and imposing head of legal affairs. The memo demanded that the engineering team finalize revisions to a client's prototype or risk breach of contract. Tristan sighed. His mind churned over potential solutions, but also dreaded any meeting with Callum. Callum loved to jab at Tristan's so-called weakness in front of others. Just then, a knock sounded on the open door. Carissa Walsh, Tristan's wife, leaned in. "Surprise?" she said with a bright, practiced smile. She was stunning in a tailored blouse and pencil skirt, her hair styled in loose waves. "Thought I'd drop by and see my hard-working husband." Tristan's face lit with genuine warmth. "Carissa, hey, I wasn't expecting you." She glided in, perching on the edge of his desk. "I had errands downtown, so I figured why not stop in?" She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And I may have an invitation from Callum for dinner tonight. Something about discussing future expansions. He thinks my input might help you push your engineering proposals." Tristan tried not to let his discomfort show. "Your input? But you're not on staff." Carissa waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, honey, it's just social. Sometimes these deals are sealed over a fancy meal and good wine. Callum says you'd benefit from a little corporate networking." She paused, eyeing Tristan's uncertain expression. "Relax, it'll be fun, and we could use a nice night out." He forced a nod, though the idea of spending an evening with Callum twisted his stomach. "Sure, if you think so," he managed quietly. Right at that moment, Callum Darnell himself appeared in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a sharp gray suit. He offered a casual smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tristan, Carissa. Busy morning, I see." He gave Carissa a lingering glance that made Tristan's palms sweat. "I wanted to confirm dinner reservations for tonight Marlowe's Steakhouse at 7. Sound good?" Carissa beamed. "Absolutely." Tristan nodded mutely, feeling overshadowed by Callum's commanding presence. "Yes, all right," he said. Callum crossed his arms. "Don't be late," he quipped, voice edged with mild condescension. Then he turned to Carissa. "We can share a ride if Tristan is stuck finishing drawings. No point in both of us running behind schedule." Carissa laughed lightly, a melodic sound that pricked at Tristan's insecurities. "We'll see," she answered. tossing her hair back. Tristan's eyes flicked from Carissa to Callum. He tried to swallow the knot forming in his throat. He'd always believed his wife was a social butterfly, and that was fine. But a growing part of him hated the way Callum seemed so at ease flirting with her. Even worse was Carissa's willingness to brush off Tristan's discomfort. As Callum ambled away, a silence fell between Tristan and his wife. She smoothed her skirt. "Don't look so grim. You know how important it is for us to keep the big guns happy. It could mean bigger bonuses for you, for us." Tristan forced a half smile. "Yes, you're right. I'll see you at home before dinner." She pecked his cheek and slipped out, heels clicking on the polished floor. Once alone, Tristan released a tight breath. Moments like this reminded him how powerless he often felt, both at work and in his marriage. He adored Carissa's energy, yet sometimes she was so wrapped up in the next social or financial opportunity that she forgot Tristan needed emotional support. Outside the window, the city glistened with promise under the mid-morning sun. Yet Tristan felt a dull ache in his chest. He recalled how, in the early days of their marriage, Carissa used to sit with him for hours, brainstorming solutions to engineering puzzles just for fun. Those days felt far away now. He turned his attention back to the design specs. A swirl of frustration hung over him. "I have to be more assertive," he whispered, half to himself. "Maybe I should speak up." But as usual, the notion quickly dissolved under fear of confrontation. If only he knew that in the days to come, all his hesitation and his entire life would change dramatically in ways he could never predict. 2 days later, Tristan found himself behind the wheel of his second-hand sedan, cruising down a lonely stretch of highway to inspect malfunctioning machinery at a distant client site. The early afternoon sun blazed overhead, and dust swirled across the asphalt from passing trucks. Tristan set his mind on the problem at hand. Some compactor unit kept failing under load, and the client threatened to switch contractors if Johnson Engineering didn't fix it soon. He was tired, but also strangely determined. The awkward dinner with Callum and Carissa had been overshadowed by Callum's incessant talk about expansions, profits, and how Tristan's soft approach might jeopardize investor confidence. Carissa had soaked it all in, occasionally throwing Tristan a pitying glance. He'd come away from that night feeling small once again. Now all he wanted was to solve the client's problem quickly, show some real results. As he tapped the steering wheel, focusing on the road, his phone buzzed in the cup holder. He recognized Carissa's number, probably calling to ask if he'd be home late. He flicked on the speaker. "Hey, you okay?" "Tristan, hi," she answered, her voice oddly breathy. I was just... How far out are you?" "Couple hours," he said, eyeing the highway signs. "Why?" Carissa hesitated. Over the background noise, he could have sworn he heard faint clinking like silverware in a restaurant. "Oh, no reason. I'm grabbing a quick bite with Callum. He offered to walk me through some legal paperwork, said it might help you close future deals." Tristan's shoulders tensed. "I see. It's just business, honey. You know how these corporate guys are?" she added quickly, as if sensing his unease. "We'll talk tonight, okay?" Before he could respond, the line disconnected. Tristan gripped the wheel, heart hammering. He told himself it was no big deal, just a working lunch, yet deep down, the old insecurity gnawed at him. He pictured them at some bistro, Callum's charismatic grin across the table, Carissa leaning in, letting her laughter ring out, and Tristan nowhere to be found. He forced the image aside. "Focus on the road," he muttered. He needed to keep his mind clear. Up ahead, an 18-wheeler rumbled in the opposite lane. The afternoon heat caused shimmering mirages on the pavement, distorting distance. Suddenly, there was a tremendous bang. The semi's front tire exploded, spewing rubber across the center line. The truck veered violently, crossing the divider. Tristan's eyes went wide. He slammed the brakes, tires screeching. The sedan skidded, fishtailing as he fought to regain control. Metal shrieked as the truck sideswiped Tristan's car, sending it spinning off the road. He felt a sickening lurch in his stomach. The seatbelt dug painfully into his chest as the sedan flipped once, then twice, glass shattering, air thick with dust and the smell of burning rubber. When the car finally came to rest, Tristan lay suspended upside down by his seatbelt, his vision blurred, blood trickling into his eyes. The world sounded muffled, as though underwater. He tried to move, but pain speared through his lower back. He barely managed to gasp. In the distance, he heard shouts, someone yelling to call 911. The semi's driver rushed over, frantic. Tristan couldn't decipher the words. Darkness flickered at the edges of his vision. As he slipped in and out of consciousness, the last coherent thought he had was of Carissa, somewhere else, likely laughing politely at Callum's jokes. The swirl of betrayal and helplessness formed one final pang in his chest before everything went black. Meanwhile, at a swanky downtown bistro, Carissa sat across from Callum, phone still in hand. She frowned. Tristan sounded strange. Callum arched a brow. Strange how? She set the phone down, forcing a small smile. I don't know. Maybe just stressed about the client problem. She hesitated. But he'll be fine. Callum reached for the wine bottle, topping off both glasses. I'm sure he will. Now about that expansion plan, Carissa's phone buzzed again, an unknown number. She frowned. Excuse me. Sliding away from the table, she answered, only to hear the urgent voice of a paramedic. Her eyes flew wide. He what? An accident. Her voice rose, attracting stares from a few nearby patrons. Is he? Yes, I understand. Which hospital? Callum watched her with a flash of alarm. Carissa ended the call, face pale. Tristan's been in a crash. They're rushing him to County General. God, I have to go. She grabbed her purse in trembling hands. I'll come with you, Callum offered, but she shook her head. No, thank you, but I need to be alone right now, she said, voice shaky. Then she spun on her heel and bolted. Callum exhaled, a flicker of unease crossing his features. Dropping a few bills on the table, he stood, uncertain whether to follow. Eventually, he left, stepping into the city's glaring afternoon sun. Far away on the highway, paramedics struggled to free Tristan from the wreck, with no guarantee he'd survive the ride to the hospital. Bright, sterile light shone through Tristan's eyelids as he fought to surface from a deep, pain-racked fog. Monitors beeped softly. The clinical smell of disinfectant filled his nostrils. He tried to move but felt stiff, as though his limbs weighed 1,000 pounds. Mr. Walsh? A voice murmured. Can you hear me? Tristan's eyes fluttered open. A doctor in scrubs and a nurse hovered near the hospital bed. His mouth felt dry, throat raw. He croaked, Where? The doctor offered a reassuring nod. You're in County General Hospital. You were in a serious car accident. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding. We performed emergency surgery on your spine. Her eyes flicked to the monitors. Your vitals are stabilizing faster than expected, though. It's remarkable, frankly. A wave of memory crashed over him, the truck's blown tire, the screech of metal, the paralyzing pain. Yet now, he was alive. I guess I got lucky, he managed, voice hoarse. The nurse gently adjusted the IV. We thought you might not pull through, honestly. Your heart stopped briefly in the OR, but then, well, you came back strong. The doctor nodded, flipping through notes on a tablet. There's some swelling in your spinal column. We'll monitor that closely. But for now, rest. No sudden movements. We'll have a physical therapist evaluate you in a few days. Tristan closed his eyes, relief warring with exhaustion. The staff left him to rest, and his mind drifted. Some part of him, half awake, felt a strange presence deep within, like a coiled tension he couldn't name. Fleeting images flashed behind his eyelids, scenes of combat, of scorching deserts, of a stern-faced soldier. But Tristan had never served in the military. A dull ache pulsed at his temple, and the visions faded. Later that evening, he awoke to the sound of heels clicking on linoleum. Carissa stood at his bedside, face drawn and anxious. She brushed aside a stray lock of hair, tears threatening to spill. God, Tristan, I was so scared, she whispered, gripping his hand. Her presence felt both comforting and strangely hollow. Tristan forced a weak smile. I'm okay. I think... Carissa let out a shuddering exhale. They told me your heart almost gave out. But you're fighting. I'm sorry I wasn't there. He gazed at her, noting the faint lines of worry around her eyes. Part of him wanted to ask about the lunch with Callum, to demand answers, but the memory of the crash overshadowed that frustration, at least for now. "It's fine," he muttered. "We can talk later." He squeezed her hand softly, then winced at the pain along his ribs. Just then, a sharp knock on the door heralded another visitor, Callum Darnell. In his suit jacket, he stood with a hesitant posture, as though uncertain he should be there. "Tristan," he said, voice subdued. "I wanted to check on you. I heard the surgery was a success." Carissa stepped aside, her expression guarded. "He's stable," she said softly. Tristan swallowed the simmering resentment that threatened to rise at Callum's presence. If only he had the energy to confront him. Instead, he just nodded once. "Thanks." Callum cleared his throat, shifting awkwardly. I brought some documents from work just in case you're up for reviewing them later. But focus on recovering. The entire office is worried about you." Tristan gave a non-committal hum, glancing at Carissa. He noticed a flicker of something in her eyes, guilt, maybe. Or was he imagining it? An uncomfortable silence thickened the room. Finally, Callum set the paperwork on a nearby table. "I'll let you rest," he said, offering a tight smile. "Heal up. We need our best engineer back." The moment he left, Tristan exhaled. Carissa tried to catch his gaze. "I know you're upset, but I'm too tired," Tristan murmured, head pounding. "Later, okay?" She nodded, leaning in to brush a gentle kiss on his forehead. He closed his eyes, letting sleep drag him under. But behind the exhaustion, something new brewed in his mind. A sharper, harder edge like a corner of his personality that had never been there before. He couldn't place it yet, but it felt powerful. The next morning, a young resident examined Tristan's reflexes. To everyone's astonishment, his legs responded better than expected, as if his body were recovering at twice the normal speed. Whispers circulated among the staff, some calling it luck, others referencing miraculous improvement. Tristan only felt a dull swirl of conflicting emotions. Every time he drifted into a half-doze, he caught glimpses of that soldier's face in his mind, hears echoes of gunfire. A name grazed the edge of his thoughts, Galen, but it vanished whenever he tried to focus on it. He chalked it up to stress, or maybe leftover hallucinations from pain medication, yet there was a sense that something fundamental had shifted inside him. Sitting there, IV tubes snaking from his arms, Tristan tested his grip, noticing how his hand muscles felt a fraction stronger. "This is weird," he thought, "but I'll take it." He had no idea how drastically this unexpected surge of vitality and the unsettling visions would shape the days ahead. For the moment, he was simply relieved to be alive, even if the lingering shadow in his dreams hinted at a far darker change than he could comprehend. Late afternoon sunlight glinted off the polished floor in one of the hospital's quieter wings. Tristan Walsh sat in a wheelchair, a nurse guiding him down the corridor for a routine exam. Each passing day, he'd grown steadily stronger, a phenomenon the doctors praised but couldn't fully explain. They wheeled him into a small waiting area where he was to meet a physical therapist. The nurse excused herself, leaving him alone with his thoughts. A faint headache pulsed behind his eyes, the same headache that often struck when he drifted off to sleep. It brought visions of conflict and betrayal, images he couldn't place. While he waited, Tristan dozed. Flashes of desert sand and swirling gunpowder choked his mind. He saw a battered Humvee, heard men shouting. Suddenly, a savage jolt shot through his chest like an echo of the hospital defibrillator. He jerked awake, gasping for breath. "Mr. Walsh?" asked a gentle voice. A staff psychologist, Dr. Elaine Porter, stood nearby, her expression concerned. She wore a floral blouse under her white coat, a slight departure from the usual drab uniforms. "You all right?" Blinking rapidly, Tristan nodded. "Yeah, sorry. Must have nodded off." She looked at him thoughtfully. "I've been asked to check on your mental state. Sometimes post-accident trauma can manifest in nightmares or hallucinations. May I sit?" He hesitated, then gestured for her to take the seat beside him. "Sure," he mumbled. Dr. Porter folded her hands in her lap. "Have you been experiencing any unusual dreams or flashbacks?" Tristan considered lying, but something about her calm demeanor invited honesty. Yes, actually, he admitted softly. They feel like war scenes. But I've never been in the military. It's disturbing. She nodded encouragingly. Trauma can play strange tricks. Your brain might be latching onto random imagery. We can explore coping strategies if you'd like. He exhaled. Maybe. Let's see how it goes. A moment later, the physical therapist arrived. Dr. Porter offered him a kind smile. If you need to talk, let me know, she said, then left him in the therapist's care. That evening, back in his hospital room, Tristan found Carissa flipping through her phone. She glanced up with relief. You look good on your feet, she observed as he used a walker to steady himself. Indeed, the improvement was almost eerie. He was already managing short steps, though his spine had been severely injured. He shrugged. I feel better than I should. Carissa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, lips tightening. Work stuff, she muttered. Callum's checking on your progress. Tristan met her gaze, something sharp flickering in his eyes. He's very considerate, he said with a trace of sarcasm, surprising even himself. Carissa blinked, not used to such direct bitterness from him. Before she could respond, a quiet ring from the corridor signaled a visitor. A nurse led Callum in. He carried a bouquet of flowers, slightly out of character for his corporate persona. Heard you were walking, he said, placing the bouquet on a nearby table. Figured these might brighten the room. Thanks, Tristan said shortly. He eyed the arrangement with mild suspicion, as though it might hide ulterior motives. Carissa gave Callum a small nod but said nothing. An awkward air settled over them all. Finally, Tristan broke the silence. So, how's the office? I imagine you're overwhelmed without me, he joked half-heartedly, hoping to cut the tension. Callum seized the opening, launching into a brief update about a new contract. We'll need you back eventually once you're fully recovered, he said. But for now, I can help expedite some issues that land on your desk. We're a team, after all. Tristan nearly scoffed. A team? He recalled how Callum used to belittle him at the slightest opportunity. The old Tristan might have swallowed his frustration, but now a faint undercurrent of anger simmered behind his polite facade. He could almost feel an invisible presence fueling that resentment, a presence that whispered, "Don't let him walk all over you." His gaze shifted to Carissa, who stood uncertainly between them. She fiddled with the rings on her fingers. Tristan noticed how she avoided meeting his eyes. Something unspoken passed through his mind. The suspicion that Carissa and Callum's relationship was not purely professional. A sudden image flashed. Carissa leaning toward Callum at dinner, that bright, inviting smile. Tristan's jaw clenched. For a moment, an intense wave of jealousy and betrayal swelled in his chest. He caught the slightest taste of a violent impulse so swift and shocking it rattled him. But he forced it down, adopting a measured tone. I'll be back to normal soon, he said. Might be sooner than you expect. Callum nodded, oblivious to the tension. That's what we all want. Shortly after, Callum left. Carissa sighed, turning to Tristan. I know things are complicated, but let's just focus on you getting better, okay? Tristan studied her face. The mild pity in her eyes stoked something dark within him. Sure, he replied evenly. Focus on me. Late that night, half asleep, Tristan sensed a deep trembling in his core, like a caged beast stirring. In his dreams, he stood on a battlefield scattered with smoldering wreckage. A soldier turned to him, a scarred man with fierce eyes, lips moving silently. Tristan jerked awake, sweat beading on his forehead. He ran a shaky hand through his hair. The raw intensity of that soldier's glare felt more real than any dream. It was as though a piece of that man lived inside Tristan now, urging him to stand up for himself, to seize control no matter the cost. Staring at the dark ceiling, Tristan murmured, "What the hell is happening to me?" He found no answer except the steady beep of hospital machinery. But in the morning, he'd be discharged, stepping back into his life with a newfound vigor and an unsettling, growing darkness coiled around his soul. A crisp morning breeze rattled the glass doors of Johnson Engineering as Tristan Walsh stepped inside for the first time since his accident. Though only a couple of weeks had passed, it felt to Tristan like an entire lifetime. He paused in the lobby, inhaling the familiar hint of industrial floor cleaner and fresh coffee. A subtle shiver ran through him. He remembered limping through these doors, meek and overshadowed. But today, something was different. His posture was straighter, shoulders squared. The weeks of physical therapy had seemingly unlocked not just his body's resilience, but also a deeper, more assertive mindset lurking within. Colleagues looked up from their desks, expressions of surprise flickering across their faces. They'd heard he was still on medical leave. Some murmured, "He's back already?" A security guard, Dwayne, approached. "Hey, Mr. Walsh," he greeted with genuine warmth. "Glad to see you up and about. We heard the accident was real bad." Tristan offered a small nod. "Yeah, guess I got lucky," he said, his tone firm. "Thanks, Dwayne." He headed across the open workspace. People parted almost instinctively, offering well wishes. Before his accident, Tristan might have ducked his head or mumbled a timid reply. Now, he maintained steady eye contact and accepted each greeting with calm confidence. He soon arrived at the wide glass office that bore his name, Lead Engineer. Inside, his co-worker Marvin was hunched over diagrams, apparently overseeing Tristan's duties. Marvin jumped up, nearly spilling coffee. "Tristan, man, this is a shock. You sure you're okay to be here?" Tristan placed a hand on the back of his own chair, exhaling. "I'm fine. Actually better than fine." He eased into the seat, ignoring the faint tightness in his lower back. "I appreciate you covering for me, Marvin, but I can take it from here." Marvin blinked. "All right, welcome back." He quickly gathered his notes and shuffled out. Alone in his office, Tristan gazed around at the half-finished prototypes and pinned-up design sketches. A sense of determination rolled through him. He recalled how, in the past, some of these same employees dismissed him as too soft. Never again, he told himself silently. Mid-morning found him in the main conference room for a quick check-in with the engineering team. The door opened, revealing Callum Darnell, the tall, broad-shouldered head of legal. A smirk tugged at Callum's lips. "Well, well. The walking miracle returns. You sure you're not pushing it?" Tristan looked him dead in the eyes, the barest hint of steel in his voice. "I heal fast." Callum raised an eyebrow, possibly caught off guard by the confident edge. "Glad to hear it. We have major updates on that new compacting line. They're demanding some reworked specs by tomorrow. Think you're up for it?" "Of course." Tristan didn't hesitate. He slid a stack of preliminary designs across the table. "In fact, I've already incorporated new parameters." Callum scanned the top page, lips pursed in mild surprise. "Not bad," he said slowly, "but let's see if these hold up under client scrutiny." Tristan leaned forward, feeling that unfamiliar dark energy coil behind his calm exterior. Galen's presence, perhaps. "They will," he stated, voice cool. "And if you have any concerns, you can bring them to me directly." This blunt attitude left Callum silent for a beat. Finally, he shrugged. "All right, Walsh, let's hope you're right." Then he pivoted and strode out, ignoring the uneasy hush that settled among the onlookers. As the door closed, Tristan caught his reflection in the large glass pane, a faint scar near his temple, the set of his jaw harder than before. He smoothed a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. Something inside him reveled in how he hadn't backed down. Later, he spotted Carissa near the break room, sipping from a designer coffee mug. She was dressed to impress, wearing a stylish blazer and pencil skirt. When she saw Tristan approach, her lips parted in mild surprise. "I didn't think you'd be back so soon." Tristan shrugged. "Surprise? Feel free to update me on anything I missed." She hesitated. "Well, sure," she said, eyes flicking around as though she expected Callum to appear. "We can talk at home tonight if—" "I prefer now," Tristan interrupted, voice firm yet collected. "Just a quick rundown, unless you have somewhere else to be?" Carissa's cheeks flushed slightly. "Fine. Let's go to your office then." Over the next half hour, she rattled off various company updates, potential partnerships, new supply chain contacts, the typical swirl of corporate dealings. Tristan listened carefully, noticing how she grew fidgety whenever he asked pointed questions about her and Callum's business dinners. She dodged specifics, only saying they'd been brainstorming expansions. Eventually, she stood to leave, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her blazer. You really do seem different, she murmured. Tristan let the comment hang. He wouldn't deny it. I'll see you at home, he replied. I'm working late. There was a time he might have politely asked for her schedule. Now he didn't care to invite her input. As Carissa departed, Tristan's phone buzzed with a message. Glancing down, he recognized the name Wesley Pierce, an old friend who worked in security. The text read, "Heard you were back. We should talk something about your wife." Tristan's jaw tightened. So it's not just in my head, he muttered. The flicker of betrayal he'd tried to suppress flared up again. For a moment, the sharp pang stoked that unknown darkness, fueling a heated vow that he'd never be blindsided again. He typed a quick reply. "Meet me tomorrow. I want every detail." Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the tinted windows of a downtown cafe. Tristan picked a table in the far corner, away from the bustle of patrons grabbing post-work lattes. He tapped his foot impatiently, scanning the crowd until Wesley Pierce entered tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped hair and a quiet confidence in his stride. Wesley had been Tristan's high school friend, now running a private security firm that specialized in undercover investigations. Wesley dropped into the seat opposite Tristan. "Good to see you upright, man," he said, voice tinged with real concern. "You had me worried." Tristan shook his hand, then leaned forward. "Appreciate it. So, your text said you had info about Carissa?" Wesley nodded, lowering his voice. "It's not a secret that I take on side gigs background checks, discreet personal investigations. Last month, Carissa contacted me asking about your finances. She claimed she was trying to help you handle insurance claims after your accident. But something felt off. Her questions were too pointed, like wanting to know the exact payoff for your life insurance, your potential settlement from the trucking company." Tristan's stomach sank. Life insurance? Settlement? That's not typical for her to handle. She barely ever discussed our finances with me. He glanced at Wesley. "Is there more?" "Yes," Wesley said. "She also started meeting this friend. You probably know him. Callum Darnell." He paused, gauging Tristan's reaction. "She'd come by my office, then leave with him. I only caught a glimpse from the security cam, but they seemed close." Tristan clenched his jaw. "She's insisted it's business, but I felt something else going on." He drummed his fingers on the table, that roiling dark presence flickering in his mind again. "Wes, I need proof something solid." Wesley offered a sympathetic nod. "I can help. With your permission, I can do some deeper surveillance. I'll be discreet, no one will suspect." Tristan inhaled slowly, remembering the humiliation he'd felt whenever Callum threw his alpha status around and how Carissa brushed off Tristan's concerns. "Do it," he said at last. "I can't go on wondering if my marriage is just a lie." Wesley reached over, clasping Tristan's shoulder. "All right, but watch yourself. If something's truly messed up, it might be bigger than just an affair." Tristan stiffened. "Bigger how?" Wesley hesitated. "I've heard rumors Callum has shady connections. He might be scamming certain individuals, possibly setting up accidents to collect insurance. Just rumors, though." A chill crept up Tristan's spine. The memory of his own near-fatal crash loomed large in his mind. Had that been a coincidence? He swallowed the bitter taste of suspicion. "Keep me updated on everything you find," he said tightly. That evening, Tristan returned to the suburban home he shared with Carissa. The place felt oddly foreign now, her decorative touches, the perfumed air from scented candles, all overshadowed by his festering distrust. He found Carissa in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up. "You're late," she said, her tone lacking any warmth. "Yeah, I met with an old friend," he replied. "Security consultant, actually. We're discussing some potential solutions for the company's expansions." A half-lie, but the edge in his voice was real. Her eyes flickered, knuckles tightening around the phone. "Oh, that's new." She forced a quick smile. "Well, you do what you have to. I was just about to step out. Callum wants my input on a new contract. It's last minute, sorry." Tristan felt his pulse spike, rage brimming, but he forced composure. "Of course he does," he said, letting the sarcasm hang in the air. "Don't let me keep you. I'll manage dinner alone." Carissa opened her mouth as if to retort, then closed it, nodding stiffly. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. In the silence that followed, Tristan's gaze landed on a framed wedding photo. The memory of that day, her radiant smile, his wholehearted devotion seemed so distant. He recalled the pain of betrayal once inflicted on another man named Galen. Although Tristan couldn't fully explain that sense, he knew one thing. He refused to be a victim of betrayal, too. Later that night, Tristan sat alone in the dim living room. The TV played some late-night infomercial, flickering across the walls. He tried distracting himself by reviewing engineering specs, but the lines blurred. Where was Carissa at this hour? A little before midnight, her car headlights swept across the driveway. Tristan listened as she entered, setting her purse down with a thud. He caught the faint scent of wine on her breath. She paused, noticing him awake. "Didn't think you'd be up," she murmured. He rose to his feet, an unsettling calm in his eyes. "Busy night?" She merely shrugged, peeling off her blazer. "Work stuff," she muttered vaguely. "I'm exhausted." As she disappeared up the stairs, Tristan stood there, fists clenched. The darkness inside him urged him to confront her, to force the truth out. But he knew that soon, Wesley's investigation would confirm or dispel his fears. For now, he'd wait and plan. In the hush of the living room, he gazed out the window into the moonlit yard, mind whirling with anger and dread. The vow he'd made earlier echoed in his thoughts. No more being naive. Somewhere beyond the suburban facade, the night pressed in, pregnant with secrets. Tristan intended to tear those secrets into the light, no matter what it took. Within days of that tense conversation, Tristan took a drastic step. He rented a small apartment in a newly developed high-rise downtown. Officially, he told Carissa he needed a place closer to work for overnight deadlines. In truth, he found the idea of living under the same roof with her growing more intolerable by the hour. It was a modest one-bedroom unit on the 6th floor. Large windows overlooked the city lights, a view that felt almost cleansing. He spent his first night there on a borrowed air mattress, the hum of distant traffic lulling him to a restless sleep. But waking up in a space that wasn't overshadowed by Carissa's presence brought a surprising sense of relief. A few evenings later, returning from work, Tristan stepped out of the elevator into the corridor of his new building. He stopped short at the sight of a little girl, about 8 years old, sitting on the floor near an apartment door. She wore a faded pink jacket and clutched a small backpack. Her cheeks were streaked with tears, though she tried to hide it behind a determined frown. "Hey," Tristan said gently, crouching near her. "Are you all right? Did you lose your key?" The girl glanced up, startled. She sniffled. "My mom's not here. She always comes home before me, but I've been waiting forever." Sympathy tugged at Tristan. He recalled his own confusion as a child whenever his parents were late. "What's your name?" "Aveline," she answered, voice trembling. "Mom's name is Annabeth. She usually gets off work early." Tristan glanced at the door, no sign of forced entry, no noise from inside. "Have you tried calling her?" Aveline's lower lip wobbled. "No phone," she admitted, hugging her backpack. "I left it in the car and Mom took the car this morning." Tristan pulled out his phone. "Let me see if I can look up an emergency contact for her, or maybe the building manager can help." Gently, he helped her stand. She was shivering slightly. "Come with me. We'll ask the front desk if they can get a hold of your mom." Downstairs, the front desk clerk shook his head. "I haven't seen Miss Annabeth Connor at all today," he said. "She's usually home by 6. Strange." Worry gnawed at Tristan. Could she have had an accident? He quickly dialed the local hospital, a premonition swirling in his gut. Sure enough, they confirmed a patient named Annabeth Connor had been admitted after a reported assault and attempted car theft. When he ended the call, his expression must have been grim. Aveline looked up at him with huge eyes. "Is she hurt?" Tristan crouched beside her. "She's at the hospital. They said it's not life-threatening, but she needs care." He glanced at the clerk. "I'll take her there, if that's all right." The clerk nodded in relief. "Absolutely. Poor kid can't be left alone. Let me just log the visitors in." Within half an hour, Tristan and Aveline arrived at the hospital's bustling ER. The fluorescent lights and antiseptic smell instantly triggered Tristan's own hospital memories. A nurse directed them to Annabeth's room, a small cubicle with a drawn curtain. Tristan lifted it gently. Annabeth lay in bed, left arm in a sling, bruises forming along her jaw. She turned her head, eyes filled with surprise when she saw Aveline. "Honey!" she choked, reaching out with her good hand. Aveline rushed over, tears spilling. "Mom, are you okay?" Annabeth stroked her daughter's hair. "I'm fine, sweetie. Some jerk tried to steal my car. I fought back. Guess I lost." She tried to laugh, but it caught in her throat. Only then did Annabeth notice Tristan, standing near the bed. She swallowed, uncertain. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Tristan offered a reassuring smile. "I live in the same building. I found Aveline waiting alone. I'm Tristan." She exhaled with relief. "Thank you. I thought I'd be back in time, but it's okay," Tristan said gently. "I'm just glad you're all right." A nurse appeared, checking Annabeth's vitals. She explained that Annabeth would need a few days' rest but was stable. Tristan hesitated, then cleared his throat. "Let me cover any immediate bills. I know how chaotic insurance can be." Annabeth opened her mouth to protest, but she caught the sincerity in his gaze. With tears threatening once more, she murmured, Thank you. I'll pay you back, I promise." Aveline looked between them, a hint of hope lighting her tear-streaked face. Tristan offered the girl a small smile. Something about the warmth in her eyes made him feel more grounded than he had in weeks. Over the next 2 days, Tristan checked on Annabeth regularly. He discovered she was a single mom working as a junior accountant, struggling to juggle bills and childcare. She'd been divorced years ago. Her ex vanished out of state, leaving her to handle everything alone. Each visit, Tristan felt a calmness bloom inside him so different from the tension gripping his marriage. Annabeth possessed a quiet resilience that reminded him of the best parts of humanity, untainted by the manipulations he sensed with Carissa and Callum. One afternoon, while Annabeth rested, Aveline tugged on Tristan's sleeve. "Thank you for helping Mom," she whispered. "I was really scared." He ruffled her hair gently. "I'm just glad you're safe, okay?" The little girl gave him a quick hug that nearly undid him. The darkness, the part that had been building in him since his accident, felt briefly eclipsed by a surge of protectiveness. In that moment, Tristan realized that not everyone in the world was out to betray or harm. Some people truly needed kindness. Still, as he left the hospital, guilt gnawed at him. He was a married man, yet he found more solace with these strangers than with his own wife. The realization hammered home a stark truth. The rift between him and Carissa might be unbridgeable, and the dark presence inside him kept whispering that betrayal must be met with retaliation. Early morning sunshine spilled across Annabeth's small living room. After a week in the hospital, she was finally discharged, arm in a lightweight cast. Tristan had offered to drive them home. Now, boxes of takeout and random grocery supplies cluttered her kitchen counters, a small welcome-home gesture Tristan arranged. Aveline bounced around excitedly, showing Tristan her stuffed animals and favorite books. Despite the swirling chaos in his own marriage, Tristan found the atmosphere unexpectedly comforting, a simple, honest warmth, unclouded by suspicion or pretense. Even Annabeth's modest apartment with mismatched furniture felt more genuine than the glossy veneer he'd shared with Carissa. While Aveline was busy in her bedroom, Annabeth sank onto the couch, wincing slightly at the pain in her ribs. Tristan sat in a chair across from her, concern etched in his features. "You need anything else?" he asked. "Let me know. I can come by after work to check on you two." Annabeth gave a small laugh. "You've done so much already. I don't want to be a burden." He shook his head. "You're not. Trust me. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Honestly, I could use a friend too." A soft understanding filled her eyes. "Rough times at home?" She gently probed, not wanting to pry. Tristan glanced at his hands, remembering Carissa's late nights, the hidden phone calls, the swirl of tension. "Something like that," he admitted quietly. "I'm not sure how to fix it, or if I even want to anymore." Annabeth nodded, sympathy clear. I get it. My own marriage fell apart years ago, and it took me a long time to realize that fighting to keep something broken can do more harm than good. She looked over at a framed photo of her with a younger Aveline. But every situation's unique. Tristan's heart clenched. Part of him already sensed Carissa's betrayal ran too deep, especially with Callum's involvement. He just needed final proof, which Wesley was still gathering. The more he saw of Annabeth's gentle strength and honesty, the more starkly he recognized the deceit in his own life. Aveline skipped back in, hugging a teddy bear. "Are you staying for lunch, Mr. Tristan?" He smiled softly. "If your mom doesn't mind?" Annabeth chuckled. "We'd love the company." She caught his gaze, a silent warmth passing between them. For a moment, Tristan felt a flicker of guilt. He was still a married man, but overshadowing that was a sense of belonging, a peace he'd craved. Later that afternoon, Tristan stepped outside to take a phone call from Wesley. The harsh midday sun contrasted with the building's shadowy entrance. Wesley's tone was grave. "I've got photos, Tristan. Meetings between Carissa and Callum at his condo late nights. I also overheard him mention something about scamming certain people with insurance fraud. Your name came up. They're planning something bigger, maybe targeting you for a payout." Tristan's jaw tensed. "So it's confirmed they're more than co-workers?" "Yeah," Wesley said quietly. "It's physical, emotional. Definitely an affair. I'm sorry, man." Tristan closed his eyes, a roar of anger surging in his chest. It felt as though a dam had broken. For a split second, he tasted the savage impulse that had fueled Galen, but he remembered Annabeth's fragile smile, Aveline's trust. He forcibly grounded himself. "All right," he said finally, voice taut. "Send me the evidence. I'll handle it." "You sure you're good?" Wesley asked gently. Tristan glanced up at the building, where inside a mother and daughter found comfort just sharing a meal. "I'm better than I was," he murmured. "Thanks, Wes." Hanging up, he realized the path forward was now clear. Carissa's treachery, the potential conspiracy to exploit him for financial gain, he had what he needed to act. That evening, Tristan returned to his suburban home for what he knew would be a temporary stay. Carissa sat in the living room, sipping a glass of wine. She barely looked up as he entered. He set his keys down, observing her guarded expression. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Her eyes darted, a flicker of fear or guilt crossing her face. "About what?" "About us," Tristan replied, voice hollow. He considered confronting her with Wesley's evidence right then, but something in him held back. Perhaps a final courtesy, or maybe a cold strategy forming in the back of his mind. Carissa pursed her lips. "I'm really not in the mood tonight, Tristan." He stared at her, the remains of any lingering affection shriveling under the weight of her lies. "Soon," he said simply, stepping away, "because I'm done playing the fool." Without another word, he headed upstairs to gather a few belongings for the night. The tension between them crackled like a live wire. In the stillness of the bedroom, Tristan exhaled, ignoring the swirl of Carissa's perfume that hung in the air. He had made his choice. He would sever ties with her. He just had to do it carefully, maybe glean more about Callum's plot, ensure Carissa wouldn't twist the narrative. But in his heart, he was already gone, carrying only the faint hope that the goodness he found in Annabeth and Aveline could keep the darkness at bay. As the moon rose outside, Tristan looked at himself in the mirror. The faint scar near his temple caught the silver light. For an instant, he thought he saw another man's reflection, Galen, lurking in his eyes. Then he blinked, and it was just him again, tired but resolute. A gloomy drizzle pelted the windows of Callum Darnell's private office high in a downtown skyscraper. Through the glass walls, the city appeared hazy, neon lights bleeding in the wet. The hush inside was broken only by muffled traffic below and the tap-tap of computer keys as Callum reviewed a digital document. A smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. Seated across from him, wearing a crisp navy suit, was Damian Stone, a cunning associate who handled much of Callum's underthietable endeavors. Damian set aside a stack of papers, exhaling in satisfaction. "These women remain unbelievably naive," he remarked. "They sign the forms. Let us manipulate their finances. It's practically a gold mine." Callum chuckled. leaning back in his leather chair. And Carissa Walsh has turned out especially useful. She's desperate enough to do anything I suggest. Ever since Tristan started pulling away, she's clung to me like a lifeline. He eyed the door warily, ensuring no eavesdroppers. That is, until Tristan's unexpected recovery. Now she's skittish. Damien raised an eyebrow. So the rumor's true. Tristan bounced back fast from that spinal injury. Not ideal for your plan, I'm guessing. A flash of annoyance flickered across Callum's face. It complicates things. My initial strategy was to keep Tristan pliant, maybe push him into another accident before he discovered our arrangement. If he died, Carissa would inherit his insurance payout. We'd manipulate her into funneling the money through us, leaving her with just enough to keep her quiet. Damien let out a low whistle. That's bold, even for you. So what's the new angle? Callum tapped his pen against the table, frustration etched in his features. I might just get rid of him some other way. One final push. If Tristan's out of the picture, Carissa collects big, and I pull the strings from behind. The question is how? The office door suddenly cracked open, revealing Carissa. She stepped in, hair damp from the rain, worry lines marring her once confident demeanor. Callum, she said softly, ignoring Damien's presence. We need to talk. Tristan's being unpredictable. Callum's eyes narrowed. What do you mean, unpredictable? Carissa set her purse on a nearby chair. He's bolder, almost intimidating. I can't get a read on him. And he's meeting that security friend, Wesley Pierce. They might be collecting evidence. If they uncover our arrangement... She faltered. Damien shot Callum a meaningful look. Callum rose, striding over to rest a placating hand on Carissa's shoulder. Relax, he coaxed. We'll handle Tristan. Don't let him rattle you. She exhaled shakily. But if he goes to the cops, we're finished. Callum's expression hardened. If he tries anything, we'll strike first, trust me. He glanced at Damien. Keep track of Tristan's movements. I want to know if he has any proof of our setup, and if so, we'll make sure he can't use it. Damien nodded, gathering the documents. On it. With a final nod to Carissa, he slipped out the door, leaving the two alone. Carissa turned to Callum, lips pressed thin. This better work. I've burned so many bridges for you. For us. For a moment, her voice wavered, suggesting the faintest hint of regret. Callum just smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Don't worry, darling. Once Tristan's gone, we'll have all we need. Yet as the rain drummed against the windows, a ripple of uncertainty passed over Carissa's face. Some part of her sensed she might be in over her head, but she tamped it down, forcing a wobbly smile. Meanwhile, Tristan stood outside the newly renovated break room at Johnson Engineering, flipping through a file Wesley had provided. Photographs of Carissa entering Callum's condo late at night. A transcript hinting at insurance scams and possible hits on unsuspecting spouses. Tristan's grip tightened on the folder's edges. This is bigger than I thought, he muttered. Tucking the file under his arm, he squared his shoulders. He was done skulking around. If Callum wanted a showdown, Tristan would give it to him on his own terms. Later that day, Tristan crossed paths with Callum in the main corridor. Employees bustled around them, but the tension hung thick between the two men. Callum smirked. Here you've been busy investigating me. Jealousy is a bad look, Walsh. Tristan stared him down. In the past, he might have stammered or backed away. Instead, he let a cold confidence settle over him. If I were you, he said, voice low, I'd watch my step. I'm done letting you treat me like a doormat. A faint flicker of surprise danced across Callum's features, quickly replaced by scornful amusement. Oh! And what are you going to do about it? Tristan felt a surge of that dark energy, the legacy of Galen, fuel his determination. A murmur of conversation died around them as a few curious employees noticed the standoff. You'll see, Tristan promised. Count on it. Callum's jaw tensed. He turned on his heel, vanishing into a meeting room. Tristan exhaled, adrenaline coursing through him. The next step was set in motion. Early the next morning, the Johnson Engineering cafeteria bustled with employees grabbing coffee and breakfast. Overhead, fluorescent lights hummed softly. Tristan entered, scanning the crowd. His heart thumped with an unwavering resolve. He spotted Callum near a group of sales reps, charming them with his usual bravado. Casting aside any last shred of hesitance, Tristan strode straight toward them. Around him, conversations paused as colleagues sensed the tension. Callum caught sight of him, arching an eyebrow. "Walsh," he greeted casually, though his tone carried a snide undertone. Tristan didn't bother returning the pleasantry. Instead, he raised his voice just enough for the onlookers to hear. "Callum Darnell, I've had enough of your scheming behind my back. You and I are going to settle this on neutral ground." A wave of gasps rippled through the staff. Callum's eyes flashed with annoyance. "Settle what, exactly?" he asked, feigning ignorance. "You want to whine because your wife prefers—" "Cut the crap," Tristan interrupted, ignoring the sting in those words. "I challenge you to a one-on-one fight this weekend. In a ring under fair rules. No lawyers, no dirty tricks. Just you and me." Silence. People exchanged wide-eyed glances. They'd never seen Tristan so confrontational. Callum let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You must be joking. You, a desk jockey, taking on me?" He flexed his shoulders, reminding everyone he was bigger, more imposing. Tristan crossed his arms, leveling a cool stare. "Yeah, me," he said simply. "Unless you're too scared to face me without your usual shady tactics." That barb struck home. Callum's nostrils flared. He couldn't back down without looking weak. "Fine," he snapped. "Name the place, but don't cry when you're flat on your back." Employees gawked. Carissa, who had just entered the cafeteria, froze near the doorway, her face drained of color. "Tristan," she whispered, voice barely audible. "What are you doing?" Tristan didn't spare her a glance. "There's an MMA gym across town, Falcon Cage. Saturday at 6. We settle this." He locked eyes with Callum, letting that unspoken challenge linger. Callum exhaled sharply, a cold grin tugging at his lips. "Fine. Winner takes all." He shot Tristan a smug once-over. "And what exactly are we betting, Walsh?" Tristan allowed a slow, dangerous smile. "Ownership rights to your ill-gotten assets plus every scrap of evidence I have on you. If you win, it's yours. If I win, you sign over your house, your car, and any hush money you stashed. All recorded by our attorneys. Deal?" A murmur of astonishment rippled among the staff. Callum's expression tightened. He realized Tristan was dead serious, but the crowd's eyes pinned him in place. He couldn't appear cowardly in front of everyone. "Done," he gritted out. "But don't expect mercy." Tristan nodded once. "See you in the cage." He turned and walked away, ignoring Carissa's panicked expression. The entire cafeteria erupted in hushed chatter. Shortly after, Carissa cornered Tristan in a quieter hallway. "Have you lost your mind?" she hissed, fear dancing in her eyes. "Callum's bigger than you. He'll destroy you." Tristan studied her face, once so beloved, now a tangle of betrayal. "You'd like that, wouldn't you?" he said softly, not quite a question. When she flinched, he sighed. "Sorry, that was cruel, but I'm done tiptoeing around." She grabbed his arm, voice dropping. "Don't do this. He's capable of worse things than you know." A flicker of sadness twisted in Tristan's chest. For a moment, he saw the old Carissa who once adored him. But that glimpse evaporated, replaced by the knowledge she was complicit in Callum's schemes. "This is my choice," he said, gently disentangling himself. "Consider what side of the ring you want to be on." Carissa's lips trembled, tears threatening. Then her pride flared, and she stormed off. Tristan let out a shaky breath. This confrontation was inevitable. He'd rather face it head-on. That evening, Tristan met with Wesley Pierce in a dimly lit office near Wesley's security firm. The hum of a small desk lamp threw sharp shadows on the walls. Wesley leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You sure about this fight? It's a big gamble. Callum is unscrupulous." Tristan tapped a thick folder. "I have enough evidence to bury him, but I need a dramatic setting to force him to sign over everything. If we do it behind closed doors, he'll weasel out. This way, in front of colleagues, he can't back down without losing face." A flicker of that harsh, newfound determination glinted in Tristan's eyes. "Don't worry, I can handle myself." Wesley nodded slowly, understanding Tristan's strategy. "Fine, I'll arrange for a neutral lawyer to draw up the bet. Make sure it's legal, but watch yourself. If he tries to cheat..." Tristan's jaw flexed. "Let him try," he said grimly. A faint memory of Galen's combative skill coursed through him, reminding him that inside he harbored the instincts of a soldier. "I won't be caught off guard." Across town, in a lavish penthouse, Callum paced restlessly while Carissa hovered by the window. Damien lounged on a plush couch, swirling a tumbler of whiskey. "You really plan to fight Tristan in some rundown gym?" Callum sneered. "I'll pound him into the canvas. Then once he's broken, we'll take everything. Might even settle that insurance claim one final time if you catch my drift." Carissa folded her arms, uncertain. She'd wanted Tristan gone, but seeing him stand up to Callum ignited old doubts. Was she ready to see Tristan hurt, or worse? Damien watched them both, a detached amusement in his gaze. "Then we move forward with the next phase. Good luck, boss." Callum downed his drink, eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Oh, I won't need luck," he muttered. And the countdown to the weekend began, each side preparing for an all-or-nothing clash. Saturday dusk settled over a gritty industrial district on the city's outskirts. Neon letters above the battered metal door spelled Falcon Cage MMA, flickering occasionally. A line of cars and motorcycles filled the parking lot. Word had spread through the office grapevine. Tristan Walsh was taking on Callum Darnell in a cage fight. Curious co-workers, a few corporate bigwigs, and random onlookers gathered to witness the spectacle. Inside the gym, the air smelled of sweat, rubber mats, and adrenaline. Rows of folding chairs surrounded the caged octagon in the center. Above, harsh overhead lights gleamed on well-worn punching bags and stacks of training gear. Tristan stood in a small locker room, adjusting the black wraps on his knuckles. He wore simple MMA shorts and a snug sleeveless top, revealing a more chiseled physique than anyone at Johnson Engineering had realized. Nerves churned in his stomach, but a calm, resolute fire burned in his chest. He wasn't just fighting for pride. He was fighting to dismantle Callum's schemes once and for all. A soft knock on the door signaled Wesley's arrival. He carried a clipboard with the legal forms. "All signed by both parties," Wesley confirmed. "Callum's attorney is out there too. If you win, his assets transfer as agreed. If he wins—" Wesley hesitated, not liking the alternative. "He gets your hush file, your settlement money, everything." Tristan exhaled slowly. "Thanks for having my back." Wesley gripped Tristan's shoulder. "Fight smart. Don't let his size intimidate you." With a final nod, he stepped out. Left alone, Tristan closed his eyes, inhaling. The darkness inside him, the echo of Galen stirred, fueling a surge of confidence. He could almost remember throwing punches in desert training camps, his reflexes honed by some second-hand memory. "I can do this," he told himself. Out in the main gym area, a makeshift announcer called the crowd to attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's main event, Tristan Walsh versus Callum Darnell. Rules: no rounds. Fight continues until one man is unable to continue or yields. Let's keep it clean." A low buzz of excitement swept the spectators. Carissa stood near the front, arms crossed protectively, tension etched across her features. A few feet away, Annabeth and Aveline lingered uncertainly at the side, having heard rumors from supportive co-workers. Aveline clutched Annabeth's hand, face worried. Annabeth's eyes held quiet concern she'd come to encourage Tristan, though she hated the idea of violence. Callum emerged first, clad in flashy red trunks. He raised his arms cockily, flexing for the onlookers. Some of his cronies cheered. He circled the cage, tossing a smirk at Carissa, then at Annabeth like he relished their anxiety. Then Tristan stepped out, crowd parting for him. A hush fell as people noticed the lean determination radiating off him. He climbed into the octagon, meeting Callum's glare head-on. A referee checked each fighter's gloves, then signaled them to begin. The fight commenced, both men circling warily. Callum lunged first, relying on his bulk, aiming a brutal haymaker. Tristan ducked with surprising speed, the blow whistling past his head. He countered with a crisp jab to Callum's ribs, startling the bigger man. Enraged, Callum unleashed a flurry of punches. Tristan bobbed and weaved, letting that intuitive soldier's reflex guide him. Each missed swing fueled Callum's frustration, causing him to telegraph his moves. The crowd roared, some in awe at Tristan's agility. But Callum wasn't just brute force. He'd trained in boxing. He managed a hook that clipped Tristan's shoulder, sending him momentarily off balance. Sensing weakness, Callum charged, tackling Tristan against the cage wall. Pain jolted through Tristan's spine. He gritted his teeth, refusing to buckle. They grappled, sweat-slick arms straining. Callum's strength was immense, but Tristan's newfound resilience refused to break. Twisting at the hips, Tristan reversed the clinch, surprising Callum with a knee to the midsection. The bigger man gasped, doubling over. Seizing the moment, Tristan delivered a precise elbow strike. It connected with Callum's jaw, snapping his head back. The crowd erupted as Callum staggered, blood trickling from a split lip. Carissa clutched the railing, eyes wide. She'd never seen Tristan like this, focused, lethal. For a split second, regret and admiration mingled in her gaze. Growling, Callum recovered, hurling a desperate right cross. Tristan blocked high, but felt the impact rattle his forearm. The next exchange turned vicious, both men landing blows. Thud Tristan took a punch to the ribs, wincing. Whack Callum ate a roundhouse kick to the thigh, staggering. Blood stained the mat as both men breathed heavily. On the sidelines, co-workers stared in shock, not recognizing their mild-mannered colleague in this fierce warrior. Wesley shouted encouragement. Annabeth gripped Aveline's shoulders, heart pounding. Even Carissa seemed torn, tears pooling. Finally, Tristan feinted left, drawing Callum's guard aside. He spun into a hooking strike that slammed into Callum's temple. The impact reverberated through the gym. Callum's eyes rolled, knees buckling. He crashed down onto the mat, gasping. Tristan dropped to a knee, ready to finish, but the referee jumped in, checking Callum's response. The battered man lay there, chest heaving, unable to rise. "Do you yield?" the referee demanded. Callum coughed, struggling to speak. He had no fight left. "I yield," he croaked. Pain etched into every syllable. The referee stood, raising Tristan's arm. The onlookers erupted in cheers and stunned murmurs. Tristan's vision blurred with fatigue and adrenaline, but relief surged through him. He'd done it, he'd taken down Callum in a fair fight. A hush fell over the Falcon Cage gym as Tristan helped the referee guide a limp Callum to a stool by the cage wall. Blood trickled from Callum's nose, and his cheek was rapidly swelling. In the crowd, Carissa pressed a trembling hand over her mouth, uncertain whether to rush to Callum's side or confront her husband. Wesley Pierce stepped forward, documents in hand. A lean lawyer with steely eyes accompanied him. "Time to finalize," Wesley announced, voice echoing. "We have an agreement witnessed by multiple parties. Mr. Darnell, you lost. Therefore, you sign over your assets, house car, plus the hush funds you extorted effective immediately." Callum's face twisted in rage, but his injuries pinned him down. "I won't, this is—" Wesley's lawyer cleared his throat. "This was a legally binding bet. We can involve law enforcement if you refuse." Some onlookers whispered in amazement. Tristan, knuckles still raw, breathed heavily, stepping back to let the legalities unfold. He locked eyes with Carissa, who hovered near the front row, tears glinting. She took a timid step forward. Callum glared at Carissa. "You worthless, are you just going to stand there?" he spat. "After all I did for you?" She shrank from his venomous gaze. "You only used me," she whispered, voice cracking. Guilt and betrayal warred in her expression. Tristan studied her, feeling a strange detachment. A part of him pitied her confusion she'd been manipulated by Callum, yet she'd allowed it too. Without a word, he turned away. This was no longer about saving his marriage. It was about exposing a nest of corruption. Damian Stone, lurking at the edge of the crowd, tried slipping toward the exit. Wesley intercepted him. "Not so fast," he said, grabbing Damian's arm. "I recognize you from the recordings. You're just as involved." Damian hissed an expletive, jerking away. But a pair of off-duty police officers, friends of Wesley, quietly stepped in, blocking his escape. The gym lights harshly illuminated Damian's pale face. He realized there was no route out. Meanwhile, the battered Callum snarled, cursing under his breath. The lawyer laid out a pen and the official documents on a small table by the ring. "Sign, or we involve the authorities regarding fraud and conspiracy," the lawyer said. Fury blazing, Callum scrawled his signature with a shaky hand. Blood from his lips smeared on the paper. He hurled the pen aside, wincing in pain. A stunned hush held the onlookers. Tristan swallowed hard, adrenaline still coursing. He had never imagined himself in this scenario, publicly forcing a powerful man to relinquish his illicit empire. Yet here he stood, chest rising and falling, the sweet taste of vindication warming his veins. Suddenly the gym doors burst open. 2 uniformed police officers strode in, followed by a detective. They'd been alerted by Wesley's team, who sent them the evidence mere minutes after Tristan's victory was confirmed. The detective's stern gaze swept the ring, taking in the scene, Callum's injuries, the hush swirling in the crowd. Wesley approached, handing over a folder with printed photos and phone transcripts. "All the evidence you need," he said quietly. "Insurance fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, plus multiple blackmail counts." Callum let out a ragged growl. "You can't pin murder on me." The detective cut him off. "We'll see what a judge has to say. In the meantime, you're under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to commit murder and fraud." He signaled the officers, who moved to cuff Callum, ignoring his pained protests. Nearby, Damian Stone was similarly cuffed, cursing under his breath. The crowd stood in stunned silence as the men were escorted out. A few onlookers even applauded, realizing how deep the corruption ran. Carissa's eyes filled with tears, her world unraveling. She looked at Tristan, heartbreak etched across her face. I didn't mean—" Tristan cut her off with a weary shake of his head. "We'll talk later." Emotions churned in him: anger, pity, relief. But exhaustion overshadowed them all. He'd won, but the cost to his heart was immeasurable. Moments later, the ring area cleared, leaving only Tristan, Carissa, Wesley, and a few stunned co-workers behind. Carissa stepped forward, voice shaking. "Tristan, please, I'm so sorry. I believed him. He said we'd be rich, that you never loved me." Tristan raised a bandaged hand. "Stop," he said softly, meeting her gaze. "We've passed the point of apologies. I gave you everything, Carissa." His voice cracked, recalling the gentle woman he once knew. "But you chose greed and betrayal." Her tears fell freely, mascara streaking. I messed up. I see that now." An ache flared in Tristan's chest. Part of him wanted to rage at her, demand she vanish. Another part wanted to collapse from sheer emotional weight. Instead, he forced calm. "We're done," he said, voice hollow. "I'll make it official." He turned to Wesley. "Help me start the divorce paperwork." Carissa let out a muffled sob, her entire posture collapsing. Though she'd allied with Callum, it was clear she hadn't comprehended how brutally everything would end. She tried to reach for Tristan's arm, but he stepped aside. His mind drifted to Annabeth and Aveline, how their warmth had steadied him. He thought of the vow he made to never again be trapped by deceit. Letting out a shaky breath, he steeled himself. Wesley put a hand on Tristan's shoulder. "You did it, man." Tristan exhaled. The battered cage behind him, the swirling dust, the harsh overhead lights, it all reminded him of the desert battle scenes flickering in his dreams. But now, the war was over, at least this phase of it. He turned, spotting Annabeth and Aveline standing near the exit, relief shining in their eyes. Annabeth offered a tentative smile, and Aveline waved timidly. Tristan managed a small nod. "Yeah," he whispered. "I did." And as the final vestiges of adrenaline ebbed, he felt the lingering echo of Galen in his soul, a quiet, grim approval, yet overshadowed by the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could forge a better life from this point onward. Morning fog clung to the quiet suburban street where Carissa Walsh stepped out of a taxi, her hair disheveled, an overnight bag in hand. The curb was still slick from last night's rain. She stared at the modest house she once shared with Tristan, memories swirling of happier times now overshadowed by betrayal and regret. She had nowhere else to go. Since Tristan cut her off financially, closing joint accounts and denying further support, Carissa had drifted from one cheap motel to another, burning through what little cash she had left. Every day she sank deeper into panic and shame. Her heart pounded as she knocked on the front door. No answer. She tried again, voice trembling. "Tristan, it's me. Let me in, please." The only response was the echo of her own words in the still morning air. Inside, lights were off, blinds shut. Tristan clearly wasn't home, or he was ignoring her. Shoulders slumping, Carissa leaned her forehead against the door. Please, she whispered. A dull ache gnawed her chest. Her phone battery had long died. She had no means to call or beg for help. Feeling a wave of desperation, she sank onto the porch step, hugging her arms tight. She'd never imagined she'd fall so low. Hours later, Tristan arrived in a hired car. He spotted Carissa's huddled figure by the porch. His jaw tightened. A part of him still pitied her, but the wedge of betrayal ran too deep. Steeling himself, he approached. "What are you doing here?" She looked up, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. I have nowhere else," she croaked. "All my so-called friends have turned their backs. I just need a place to stay for a night or two. Please." Tristan swallowed, recalling how she once conspired with Callum to exploit him. "You made your choice," he said quietly, voice tinged with bitterness. "I can't let you back in." Carissa's expression broke. Tears glistened. "Tristan, I'm sorry. I realize now how foolish, how greedy I was. You have every right to hate me." She reached for his hand, but he withdrew. "If you can find it in your heart to forgive." He shook his head, stepping back. "Forgiveness might come someday, but not now. And not like this." His gaze flicked to her overnight bag. "I'll give you some cash for a motel, nothing more." Defeat settled over her features. She took the money he handed over with trembling fingers, words failing her. Without another plea, she shuffled away down the sidewalk, shoulders hunched in silent despair. Tristan exhaled a trembling sigh, then entered the house, locking the door behind him. The echo of Carissa's footsteps faded. Any lingering affection he had felt strangled by the memory of her betrayal. That night, Carissa staggered through a dingy neighborhood, bottle in hand. She found a cheap motel with flickering neon, paid for a single room. The walls inside were scuffed, the air stale. Numb with heartbreak, she collapsed onto the threadbare bed, drowning her regret in cheap liquor. In a haze, she rummaged for painkillers in her purse, mixing them with the alcohol. Tears burned her cheeks as she whispered Tristan's name, half hoping he'd appear to save her. But as the minutes ticked by, a heavy darkness loomed. The swirl of pills and booze tugged her deeper into oblivion. At some point, she vomited, collapsed on the floor. Neighbors heard her moans through the paper-thin walls and called for help. Paramedics arrived, lights flashing in the night, rushing her to the emergency room. Carissa hovered on the brink of consciousness, a last flicker of regret crossing her mind. This is what I deserve. By dawn, she lay in a hospital bed, attached to IV drips. Her face looked ashen, tear tracks on her cheeks. A nurse stepped in, checking vitals with a sympathetic sigh. Carissa's eyes fluttered open, confusion mingling with relief that she was alive. "Looks like you'll pull through," the nurse said softly. "You're lucky someone found you." Carissa stared at the ceiling, hollow. She felt neither lucky nor relieved. Realizing how close she'd come to death, she felt a stab of fear. Her last memory was cursing Tristan's name, swallowed by darkness. In that stillness, she whispered to herself, "I'm sorry. Sorry to Tristan. Sorry to the life she destroyed for greed." But remorse didn't ease the crushing weight in her heart. Meanwhile, Tristan learned of Carissa's overdose through a curt hospital call. He listened, expression grim. Then he clicked off, struggling with conflicting emotions, pity, anger, a weary sense of responsibility. Yet he steeled himself to remain distant. He owed Carissa nothing but the truth. Their marriage was over. That same afternoon, the justice system continued its work. Callum Darnell and Damian Stone faced arraignment for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and other charges. The local news reported on the scandal, fueling office gossip. Some employees pitied Carissa's meltdown. Others claimed she deserved it. Tristan tried not to dwell on it, focusing on the upcoming trial. He'd soon be summoned to testify. Thus began Carissa's final descent, shunned by acquaintances, reliant on hospital charity for recovery, weighed down by the knowledge that she had betrayed the only man who ever cared for her. In the bleak nights that followed, she wondered if there was any road back to normalcy, or if this emptiness was her new reality. A brisk wind tugged at Tristan Walsh's suit jacket as he stepped onto the courthouse steps downtown. The imposing limestone facade and tall pillars loomed under a pale winter sun. Clustered near the entrance were reporters, lawyers, onlookers. The high-profile hearing of Callum Darnell and Damian Stone had attracted considerable attention. Annabeth and little Aveline stood near Tristan, offering moral support. Aveline wore a knitted hat with bright pom-poms, looking wide-eyed at the bustling crowd. Annabeth gently touched Tristan's arm. "You sure you're ready for this?" He forced a faint smile, grateful for her warmth. "I have to be. I'm the key witness to everything they plotted." They moved inside, passing through security. The hallway buzzed with lawyers conferring, clerks rushing about with files. Wesley Pierce appeared, greeting them with a nod. "All set, Tristan? The prosecution will call you for testimony." Tristan inhaled. "Let's do it." In the wood-paneled courtroom, a hush fell as the bailiff announced the start of proceedings. Callum sat at the defense table, hands clasped, eyes darting warily around. He looked thinner, the bravado replaced by grim tension. Beside him, Damian stared ahead, face expressionless. Prosecutors presented evidence of insurance fraud schemes, blackmail, and conspiracy to harm Tristan. Bank records, phone transcripts, and witness statements piled up. The defense tried to downplay Callum's role, painting him as a mere negotiator who got carried away. But the evidence was overwhelming. Finally, Tristan took the stand. The prosecutor guided him through key points: how he discovered Carissa's betrayal, found Callum's suspicious transactions, documented conversations, and overcame attempts on his life. Tristan's voice remained calm yet resonant, recounting each detail with precision. At times, he glimpsed Callum's smoldering glare across the courtroom. The defense attorney attempted to discredit Tristan, suggesting he was motivated by revenge, pointing to his MMA fight as a sign of aggression. Tristan answered steadily, "I challenged him openly because he threatened to eliminate me. I needed a public resolution. The documents I had prove his intent. My confrontation was an act of self-preservation." When he finished, the prosecutor's satisfied nod indicated Tristan's testimony had landed a solid blow against the defense. Outside in the corridor, the tension lingered. Annabeth embraced Tristan gently as Aveline hovered at his side, clutching a stuffed toy. "I'm proud of you," Annabeth whispered. He rested his chin briefly on her hair, heart full of gratitude for their presence. Yet a flicker of unease tightened his chest. The old, dark presence Galen lingered like a half-forgotten phantom. During the cross-examination, he'd flashed back to the savage sense of triumph from that ring fight. Part of him worried he might be drifting too close to that violence again. Wesley joined them. "You did great. The prosecution expects a swift verdict. They have Carissa's partial statement plus the documents we discovered. It's airtight." Tristan tensed. Mention of Carissa's cooperation stung. He recalled how she'd apparently broken down and told investigators everything about Callum's plans. Too little, too late, in his view. But it helped seal Callum's fate. Later that afternoon, the judge announced bail would be denied for Callum and Damian, citing the severity of charges. The trial date was set for a few weeks later, but it was clear the defendants faced a harsh sentence. In the gallery, Tristan watched as deputies escorted Callum in handcuffs. Their gazes locked for a final moment. Callum's eyes burned with resentment, but he was powerless. Tristan exhaled, relief tinged with lingering sadness. This was how it ended, not with some grand duel, but a grim legal reckoning. Annabeth squeezed Tristan's hand. "It's almost over," she whispered. He nodded, letting out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Yeah," he murmured. "Thank God." As they exited the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Tristan shielded Aveline, ignoring the barrage of microphones. All he wanted was to leave the chaos behind. He'd done his part to ensure justice was served. Behind him, hidden from the cameras, a nurse aided Carissa in a wheelchair. She'd come to observe the hearing, though she was still weak from her hospital stay. She overheard the judge's decision, tears slipping down her cheeks. Her entire world had imploded. Now the only man who might have supported her Tristan was beyond reach. The nurse gently escorted her away, the corridors echoing with finality. A sterile whiteness enveloped the quiet hospital corridor. The faint scent of antiseptics drifted in the air. Tristan walked slowly, the hum of overhead fluorescent lights accentuating his sense of unease. At the end of the hallway, he reached a private ward where a receptionist nodded, directing him to Carissa's room. He paused at the threshold. Carissa lay in bed, an IV drip in her arm. Her eyes were red-rimmed, hair unwashed, a stark contrast to the glamorous woman she once was. She turned at his approach, heartbreak flickering on her pale features. "Tristan," she whispered. He stepped in cautiously, staying near the foot of the bed. "The nurse said you asked to see me." Carissa tried to sit up. "Yeah, her voice cracked. "I wanted to apologize for everything." She swallowed, tears pooling. "I let greed and bitterness poison me. I lost myself." Tristan's heart clenched, yet he maintained a calm facade. "It's too late for apologies to fix us, Carissa. You know that." She nodded, each breath ragged. I know. I messed up so badly, but please, can we at least part without hate? I'm not asking for a second chance, just some mercy." A swirl of conflicting emotions roiled in Tristan's chest. He recalled their early days, her laughter, the glimmer of shared dreams before it all shattered. She was the woman he once loved, despite her betrayal. He exhaled. "I don't hate you," he admitted quietly, "but I can't trust you, and I can't ignore what happened." She closed her eyes, tears sliding down. "I understand," she managed. After a beat, she noticed a set of divorce papers in his hand. A fresh wave of sorrow tightened her throat. "So that's official now?" Tristan stepped closer, placing the document on a bedside tray. "Yes. I brought them for your signature. We discussed this. I'm finalizing everything." She ran trembling fingers over the pages, reading the lines that spelled out the end of their marriage. With a shaky pen, she signed where indicated. The scratch of ink on paper felt like a coffin nail sealing a broken vow. When she finished, Tristan retrieved the papers, tucking them into a folder. Silence weighed between them. Finally, she murmured, "What will you do now?" He hesitated, glancing at the half-open window where sunlight cast thin rays on the tiled floor. "I'm going to live without lies, without fear. I have a chance to start over." Her gaze dropped, voice cracking. "I'm glad. You deserve happiness. I hope you find it." For a moment he considered some comforting gesture, but the gap between them was irrevocable. Instead, he offered a single nod. "Carissa, I do hope you recover, that you find your footing again." A strangled sob escaped her. She lowered her head, unable to meet his eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, raw pain lacing each word. Tristan turned and left, heart heavy yet unburdened. Each step down the corridor felt like shedding 1,000 regrets. He wouldn't forget the lessons of this heartbreak, nor the dark rage that once threatened to consume him. But he would not be defined by it. Outside, crisp daylight greeted him. Annabeth waited near the entrance, a gentle smile offering solace. Aveline held a handmade card in her arms, likely for some friend at school, but her big eyes lit up when she saw Tristan. He drew a deep breath, allowing the warmth of their presence to steady his racing heart. Carissa's chapter was officially closed. He was free from the weight of deception that once overshadowed every moment. Weeks later, a bright springtime sun shone on a quiet suburban block. The lawns were lush after recent rains, birds chirping in budding trees. At the end of a cul-de-sac stood a charming 2-story home with a pale blue door and a small porch swing out front. Annabeth had saved for years to buy a better place for her and Aveline, and with Tristan's unexpected financial windfall after exposing Callum, they'd found a cozy spot to start anew. Aveline burst out the front door, squealing with delight. "Tristan, come see!" She raced across the yard, arms wide, her pigtails bouncing. Tristan caught her in a playful hug. She giggled, pressing a construction paper drawing into his hands. "It's us, see?" she announced proudly. The drawing depicted a simple trio, Aveline, Annabeth, and Tristan all smiling under a cartoon sun. Tristan's chest tightened with affection. "I love it," he murmured, tapping the bright crayon sun. He'd never dreamed he'd have a bond like this with a child who wasn't his by blood, yet she felt like family. From the open doorway, Annabeth smiled softly, one hand on her hip. "Careful, you'll spoil her with praise," she teased. Her eyes sparkled with warmth. Gone was the worry that once shadowed her features. They'd built a new life together, piece by piece. Tristan handed the drawing back to Aveline. "Hang it on the fridge, kiddo. We need more art in this place." With an excited squeal, she darted inside. Later, as twilight deepened, Tristan and Annabeth settled on the porch swing, the gentle squeak of the chains matching the soft chirp of crickets. A light breeze ruffled the budding flowers lining the porch railing. Annabeth leaned her head on Tristan's shoulder. "It still feels surreal sometimes," she said, voice hushed. "Everything that happened. We've come so far." He slid an arm around her, warmth blooming at the contact. "Yeah, I almost can't believe it myself." A reflective hush passed. Then he swallowed, confiding something that had haunted him for weeks. "Sometimes I get flashes like I'm two people, the soldier in my head and me. It's less frequent now, but it's there." She tilted her face upward, concern in her eyes. "Galen, right?" she asked gently. Tristan had told her bits and pieces about that dark presence, how after his near death, he felt a soldier's memories. She never judged, only listened with compassion. He nodded, releasing a slow breath. "Yes. That presence gave me strength, but also a dangerous edge. I worried it would consume me, lately. Maybe I'm learning to live with it, to keep it harnessed." Annabeth cupped his cheek, her voice soft. "You're a good man, Tristan. Whatever darkness you carry, you still choose kindness, empathy. That's what matters." She paused, lips curving in a half-smile. "Besides, Aveline and I won't let you brood too long." His heart swelled with gratitude, leaning down to brush a light kiss on her lips. A comfortable silence followed, each savoring the closeness of the other. Overhead, stars began to glint in the indigo sky. In the distance, Aveline's laughter mingled with faint music from the living room. Eventually, Tristan rose, stepping inside to fetch them warm tea. As he passed a decorative mirror in the entryway, his reflection caught his eye. The faint scar near his temple, the one reminiscent of Galen's, was barely visible now. A quiet sense of peace filled him. He reached up, touching the spot lightly. In that moment, his mind flashed an image. The desert battlefield, bombs exploding, Galen's enraged roar. But the vision faded swiftly, leaving only the echo of lessons learned from pain and betrayal. A subtle smile curved Tristan's lips. He was free not because he denied his past, but because he accepted it, forging a gentler path forward. Outside, Annabeth watched the sky shift from purple to starlit black, rocking gently on the porch swing. Aveline popped her head out the door, announcing she'd set the table for tea. Tristan returned with the teapot, steam curling from the spout. The three of them chatted under the glow of a porch light, the soft murmur of family contentment overshadowing any lingering shadows. Time eased on, the hush of the neighborhood lulling them. Aveline eventually yawned, hugging Tristan goodnight before scampering off to bed. Annabeth and Tristan lingered, hands entwined, each sip of tea feeling like a promise of the life they'd continue to build together. Honesty, tenderness, and quiet resilience the cornerstones of their newfound bond. At length Annabeth rose, extending a hand. "We should rest too. Tomorrow's a new day." Tristan smiled and stood, letting her guide him. "A new day," he echoed. He cast one final glance at the star-flecked sky, recalling how not so long ago he was trapped in a toxic marriage, consumed by bitterness. Now, a modest home with two bright souls had become his sanctuary. In the warm glow of the porch light, he leaned in, pressing his forehead to Annabeth's. She closed her eyes, a contented sigh escaping her lips. Then, side by side, they stepped inside, leaving the quiet street behind. The door clicked shut on the final vestiges of a harrowing past: Galen's rage, Carissa's betrayal, Callum's destructive plots. In their place stood hope, family, and a promise that even the darkest wounds could be healed through courage and love.